Is this working? Hello? All right. I thought I could run this off of my computer, but it doesn't look like I can. Wait, no, I don't want to do that. Can you hear me? All I need to know is that you can hear me. So was the thumbs up? Yes, I can hear you. I'm just testing this out. Why is this not working? No. Okay. We got 2 more minutes. Send it all to all your friends. All right, so you can hear me. That's a good sign. All right. I don't know why this won't let me do it through the computer. I mean, it lets me start it, but I can't manage it for some reason. Not sure why. Like I tried to make you a speaker and it will not, you click on the person and it doesn't work. But if I do it on the phone, no problem, which is super weird. Yeah, it doesn't do it on the... Oh, it does work over there. It does. All right. Let me see if I can get this to work. Oh, whoever that was disappeared. So I figured out how to do it on the computer. Are you getting this invitation deal? All right. Let me try to... All right, so I've got this open like on the computer and on the phone. I was hoping to do it on the computer. Apologize to everybody for confusion. Let me see what happens if I close this out. Can you hear me now? Can you guys like give a thumbs up or something that you can hear me? That'd be super helpful. Anyone at all? Bueller. Okay, I got thumbs up from Ethan. Fabulous. Okay, I got it to work on the computer. That is good news. So welcome everyone to 2.0 of this conversation that I tried to have earlier today, but looks like people were very busy or couldn't come on the, voice part of the space. What I'm setting out to do here, and that's why I invited everybody to speak, because I don't really have a topic other than the obvious recent announcement of RFK to endorse Trump, which puts a lot of people in a new position vis-a-vis voting for Trump. Now, obviously, there may be people here present today who are always going to vote for Trump, and this is, maybe this is a bad thing for you. I don't know, but for me, I wasn't going to be perfectly honest, and now I'm kind of changing my mind, and that's sort of the big challenge for me. Is before, when I was kind of like, I'm not voting, I'm a principled person. Maybe I'll vote for Chase Oliver. I don't know what I'll do, but I can't get behind either of these candidates. I didn't really have to explain much to the people closest to me. They were sort of like, okay, that's a principled position. That's fine. after yesterday, now that I'm saying, well, between that and what I'm hearing at the DNC, I'm seriously considering voting for Trump. And now I'm getting lectures. You've abandoned your principles. And what are you doing? And I've not been in that position before. I know a lot of people who are Trump voters are in that position all the time. They're getting, constantly harassed by people for their decision to vote or their support or whatever. But I'm curious to know from people who are maybe changing their mind or they're considering changing their mind, kind of what's going on in your head, how you feel about it. Are you coming up against other people? What are the arguments? What are the arguments you have with yourself now? What do you like about these developments? What do you worry about these developments, if anything? And I just would love to hear from anybody at all. So like I said, I've extended an invitation to everybody here to, to be a speaker. So you should have received that. If you have not, let me know. I've clicked it for everyone. And so you can just click on that and then become a speaker and join in the conversation and share what your thoughts are today about this issue. Otherwise, it's going to be just me. I can keep talking about what's going through my head, but I think that's very interesting in relation to nothing. But I guess I'll just say that the main thing that appealed to me was that somebody who cares a lot about things I care about, namely our food supply, food safety, the fraud that's going on in that in the pharmaceutical industry, and the forever wars, so-called military industrial complex, as well as censorship and just massive control over, who we get to vote for in the first damn place. I think I like the idea that Trump is willing to welcome someone like that into his, kind of campaign team. He's willing to listen to that feedback. And that tells me he's grown, if you will, since the last time. Now, I know a lot of people are cynical and they say it's a good move politically, it's strategic. Of course, it's that as well. But I'm giving him, I guess you would say, the benefit of the doubt that he also sincerely wants to leave a positive legacy. We know that his narcissistic tendencies would indicate that, and that might be a good use of them. If you want to leave a positive, you want people to think back on you fondly in the future, as we do, let's say, about Reagan, then you're going to have to do something good. And so if he turns that attention towards some of these issues that RFK was talking about, that could be a good thing. And I suddenly felt like I had a reason maybe to vote for him. But that was my thinking. I'd love to hear from anybody else. Jennifer, do you want to?
Hi, I'm here, but I'm in the car. So if the AC is too loud or there's background noise, you just let me know.
You're totally fine.
Well, welcome to the other side of things. I know you've been trying to navigate this whole political turmoil, and I know you've been on the fence with everything. And I have been there. I was there 4 years ago and 8 years ago. My husband and I were both so fed up with Trump in 2017, 18 and all of the rhetoric. And as lifelong Republicans, we struggled with his narrative. And, we actually went and lived abroad for a year in a very liberal city in Europe and got away from all of the mayhem and then came back into it. And kind of, as you know, our kids changed everything for us because of what was happening in their schools and in their education and our public education system. And we became actively engaged and changed our perspective on our available candidates a little bit, and that, I think that we could have put two other people up, but we are where we are. We were big DeSantis supporters, and I will vote for the person that will protect my children and the future of this country. And for me, that's Trump. Will I do it? I've said to some people, kind of have to go in, if you need to close your nose and close your eyes and pinch your nose and check that box, then you do it. But there's so much at stake right now that I feel like he's our only option. And having RFK's incredible speech yesterday, I think has turned a lot of people onto that perspective. So I'm grateful for that. And I know it's been hard for a lot of people, including yourself. And I understand where you're at.
Well, when you mentioned the children, and that obviously, what do I live and breathe, right? That's like my entire brand is, what are we going to do to protect our kids? Their birthright has been taken from them, in my personal opinion, and we have to try to scrape some of it back. And, listening to him talk so clearly, just so much clarity about their health, about the likelihood they're going to get stuck in some war, just the fraud, the mass fraud and corruption, which basically poisons everything. Like whatever party you're in or inclined to lean towards in terms of policy, we can't have an honest debate. We can't have we the people, we cannot engage in self-governance if people are constantly lying to us. And if you have this fourth estate that is, or is it a fifth estate at this point? I don't know which one education is. But if you've got these institutions that are captured, and they're captured not just by people within your own country who disagree with you and have shut down any kind of debate or freedom of speech there, but foreign entities are coming in. And then you have people within the government who've taken an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution who are facilitating the loss of our sovereignty. And so when I look at these candidates now, especially after hearing RFK, because let's face it, Trump there's a lot of things he does well in terms of being a showman and attracting a lot of people who just believe that he cares about the country, like believe that he doesn't hate America. Okay, which I hate to, this is damning with faint praise, right, but at this stage, but he's not a very good, he's not a good articulate defender of what we do want. And so I think RFK did a much better job of that, even though there'll be policy issues, maybe, sort of specific solutions I might disagree with. He's much better at articulating the kind of patriotism, the kind of concern for our children in the future and our ultimate liberty than Trump is. And so I felt like, oh my God, there's still someone out there who's actually fighting for what matters, those principles that matter, even if we might differ on how to go about doing it. And we have to have those conversations. It sounds like anyway, he wants to fight for our ability to have the conversations, to do the research, to publish the research without hindrance from government or government toadies and cronies and people like that who don't want us to see it or hear it because that'll compromise some power or money-making scheme they've got. And right now it's a pay-to-play situation. And to me, the proof that he's sincere, RFK, is the heat that he's taking from his own damn family.
It was terrible.
It's sad. Really disgusting, actually. I think what Tammy Bruce put out today and her response to the family was spot on. They have no ground to stand on when it comes to, talking about someone's ethics or somebody's loyalty. They're loyal to a fault to horrible people and have been throughout, where do we start and where do we end, right? The Kennedy family. And here's somebody who is on his own, who's basically stood against giant machines who've called him every name in the book and tried to make him out to be ridiculous instead of engaging and showing why he's wrong. And that Trump is receptive to working with him, even though, he has said some very not nice things about Trump in the past. I think that shows, like I said, that Trump is thinking more strategically now, which was a flaw. Before, he didn't understand the political landscape. He didn't understand about coalition building. And now that shows me he's learning, which is good. It also shows me that he's open to having somebody who's demonstrably an expert on something he's never even spoken about. Never mind, does he know anything about? And let's face it, who screwed him over? The NIH and the CDC helped facilitate the massive screw over of the Donald Trump administration with the COVID policies. So I don't even doubt that there's a little bit of, Trump is very big on revenge. But I have no problem with anybody seeking revenge against those people, because I personally would like it as well. They deserve it. And they ruined a lot of lives and killed a lot of people, in my opinion. So those things made me feel like, all right, there's a glimmer of hope that there are some targeted areas where we might throw some serious sand in the gears and at least wake some more people up to the degree of fraud that's going on. And that's something to me.
And I think you're right. RFK did a really beautiful job, and he was so succinct in explaining all of these things and the corruption of the media and the takeover, and it was we went from that to typical Trumpisms.
Yeah.
Where he was like, they're telling me not to make fun of and call people names. And I was like, why do you even, obviously your people are trying to coach you. Just listen to them. Just kind of hear them out. But he just is who he is. And I don't think there's any changing that. But it's.
Yeah. The only thing that I'm concerned about still is his choice of Vance. I guess I'm alone there in that I'm really not a fan of his. I know a lot of people are like in the sort of hillbilly elegy side of him, and I'm not. I believe the Yale side of him is more the real guy. And I'm very concerned about his economic views, his connection to American Compass, which is a think tank.
The globalism.
Yeah. And remember, we still ultimately have a dueling, it's like a, what do you call it? Dialectic between two versions of tyranny, the sort of neoliberal, somebody was on the previous space, the neoliberal and the neocon side, both of which ultimately are not remotely interested in classical liberalism of our founders. They're really not interested in relinquishing power back to the people. They just have different views about how it should be exercised. But when it comes to private property, when it comes to freedom of speech, when it comes to all these things, they're just duking out who's going to hold the ring of power. And that's why I've not been a so-called card-carrying member of, any party for a very long time, because I've seen it. I didn't know what to call it, what the names were of the different sort of versions of it, but now I see it very clearly. And I don't think Trump is in either one of them. I will give him credit for that. I do think he's an outsider. I do think he's more of a populist, or more of what you might even ironically call a JFK Democrat, right? Who by today's standards would be considered a right-wing Republican. Exactly. On his, reduction of taxes, his opposition to communism and collectivism in general, and so forth. But JD Vance, I don't feel the same way. And it was a weird choice. I don't really understand the choice. I'll be perfectly honest.
Just my circle of people that I discuss these things with, most of them were completely, I would say 80% were like, this is fantastic. And then there were 20% were like caught off guard. I was hoping for if you want a definite win, you would say, okay, he would take on a more moderate, maybe even RFK. But then the conundrum is that our family, we're pretty conservative, and you look at JD Vance on paper and it makes sense.
Right.
So
except for his Democrat wife, but other than that, I'm not buying her setting conversion. I'm like, maybe I'm the, and we've seen stuff like this before, where, people underestimate the spouse, but I
don't know. I would like to hear more from her. We haven't.
I would like to as well. I want to hear because she had a very strange look on her face during the convention. So I'd really like to hear more.
She did.
Yeah.
I caught that as well.
It was a little strange.
A little shocking. Yeah.
But here's the thing. We have to remember that he would be the vice president. So then we have to think about, Trump is a delegator. He always has been a delegator. He, likes to go out in front of the cameras and saying stuff, but he leaves policy matters to other people. And so the big question for me is, what would he be in charge of? And that's also why RFK, brings something to the table that I like. If he puts him in a cabinet level position, and there are probably 3 or 4 I could think of that would be appropriate, it would be great. Like, where do we want to put him? Do we want to put him in AG? Then he'll reform a lot of stuff that needs to be reformed. Do you want him in
Secretary of Health?
Yes. Or HHS or whatever. there's
Yeah.
a lot of good that he could do. Personally, that's where I would prefer for him to be, but it's we do need a good attorney general. We need somebody in charge of the Justice Department who is going to go in there. And I would have liked to see somebody like Vivek, because he has a plan to consolidate the FBI, Homeland Security, and not only cut costs, but make that more efficient and less onerous on the American people as far as surveillance. So I thought he had a decent plan. I know people don't trust him for other reasons, but he had a plan. And listening to the plan, I was like, this makes a lot of sense, but I don't know. I don't know who would.
But where JD Vance is great, he's great on his toes. He's really a great speaker. I mean, he does a lot of things really well that Trump lacks.
Yeah. He probably should tone it down on the whole women rhetoric, though, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's
it's unfortunate. Let's put it this way. We all know what he was talking about, right? But there are better ways to put that. There are better ways to put that. Like, I wouldn't even have singled out women. I would have simply said people who are anti-family and anti-child, and they're legion, and they're both men and women, right? It's not just women. And there are people who, speaking to anti-family, and not family values, but family virtues. I want to get away from the word values so badly because that's subjective. But the virtues are pretty much written down, right? It's like, are you going to dispute that honesty and thrift and loyalty and certain things are not virtues? Like, who doesn't find those to be virtuous? So I think speaking about having a government that doesn't get in the way of families being families, it doesn't presume to know better than parents, and doesn't presume to know what the right way to live is in your private life. That was always the claim of the Democrats, right? That we don't want to get in your bedroom, and we don't want to, bother you where you live. And it's like, but you want to come into the bathroom with me, and tell me who has to be in there in the locker room and with my kids. And, so they're kind of, and no one's taking advantage of that. No one is taking advantage of the degree to which they are explicitly saying what the right way to live is. And there needs to be a moral case for that. So I think he could do, if somebody gets to him and says, look, we know you understand the issue, like that, we're not disputing that you get it on on every level. Now let's get him to articulate it so that it doesn't sound like a bunch of misogynistic, like middle school insult kind of stuff. Which even if I overlook it and say, all right, cat lady, whatever, it's just annoying. I was like wincing. Like, seriously, dude, really? It's
right. But that's the thing. There's so many of those moments when you're just cringe. This is, I cannot believe that just came out of someone's mouth that I'm about to vote for. But it happens all the time.
Well, and it is a fair thing to say that on, whatever, if you're not on the left. Okay, I don't want to use terms like conservative or whatever, but if you're not on the left, you tend to wince more, take this stuff more seriously, hold people to higher standards of this stuff. They don't have any problem at all with the junk that comes out of their candidates' mouths that is just so awful. They say hateful, horrible things about entire swaths of humanity and get away with it. And so I've had people lecture me when I've criticized, let's say, Trump, and they'll, or JD Vance or whatever, and they're like, really? And what about this? And what about that? And what about the other? And the thing is, I try to criticize them. I criticize both. I don't ever exclusively go after, one side. I'm like, don't you guys want to be the representatives of all Americans? You don't talk about people like this. Even if I disagree with people, they're human beings. You don't talk about them this way. But it's interesting that people get their back up more when I do it against, when I say something critical of Trump, or have said something critical of Trump, because the left gets away with it 100% of the time. And I do understand, emotionally understand that. But when you're a person like me, where you try so hard to maintain your integrity and be,
a truth teller.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's not easy being that person. And you're great at it, but it's
a struggle. It's a struggle. And that's what
you're alone on an island.
And that's why I was like, when I started having these feelings, and then I didn't expect this, but I asked my husband, I said, did you hear RFK speak? And he said, don't tell me you're going in for that, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I barely even got to say what he said. He didn't hear him. and I don't want to, badmouth somebody who isn't here. He's not here to defend himself, but he was like, "What happened to your principles? What happened to this? What happened to that?" And I'm sitting there trying to explain that ultimately politics is about pragmatism. I mean, you have principles and you defend them and you voice them consistently, but when it comes to the voting booth, like, you got to walk in there and pick a candidate. Obviously you want to pick the person who's as principled as you can possibly find, or but you also have to think of the problem you're facing right now. And when I look at my kids, I'm like, how could I not give them every chance to have at least some more sand thrown in the gears to slow this train that's heading for the cliff as best I can, till they're at least old enough and established that maybe they can deal with it on their own, you know?
Right. And you've raised kids. I know you talk about your daughter, and they know exactly what's happening in this world. They call it exactly what it is. They truly feel like if we don't stop this train, then we could end up being a socialist communist country years down the road with the policies that we're talking about implementing. And that's a scary thing for kids that are paying attention.
Right. And it honestly, it concerns me because I don't want us to have to shoot our way out of this. Remember, you can vote your way into that junk, but you can't vote your way out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So there's only one scenario.
I don't see another solution. Maybe I'm crazy, but Ethan, did you want to say something?
Well, I crafted a small response to you. I posted it on at least on the iPhone. Uh, Thinking about, I mean, that's a good point, right? Purity of libertarians are kind of unique. We tend to stick to principles more than other groups, versus purity versus pragmatism. But I think we should answer a few questions to see if that or how that applies. So in listening to President Trump, listening to RFK last night, and listening to some of the interviews that President Trump has done recently, I kept asking myself, keep this in mind. Is he expanding the liberties of the individual, or is he communicating some coercive policy or a new bureaucracy to expand federal government power? I haven't found a single thing that enhances federal power. Now, that's not to say he might beef up the military a little bit, nothing like that. Uh, but how infrastructure, he realizes it's an issue. A counter argument would be, well, he's authoritarian, but is he really? Being an authoritarian also implies strict controls over individual liberties. But I don't hear him advocating coercive policies. I don't. Anything coercive is federal government aimed aimed at them exclusively. He is not a fan of the deep state. This is good. That's not individual liberties. Uh, and it doesn't mean you agree with all his ideas either. So in the end, the purity versus pragmatism, I think, has to win out. I think those of us that have been in the Libertarian Party for years, we know we get 3 to 5%. Well, that's great. We're making a wonderful point. Not. I've been a long lifetime Libertarian. Not to poo-poo on us too much, but what if Trump is not the president? Do we know, or do we have good reason to believe that any individual liberties will be tamped on? Yes, we do. RFK talked about it just last night. Censorship. And that's a huge, huge deal in my book. Are there policies of Kamala that hinder or preserve individual, that allow you to exercise your principles? Which side does more to preserve the principles that we've established and kind of take pride in being independent or being libertarian? Could we leave Kamala's program if we don't like what it is? No, we can't. We can't leave Trump. Whoever gets in there, you said something about this, and that, yeah, we're stuck with the choice. That's true. Absolutely. So going in, ask that two-part question. Who preserves liberties or who expands them, and who squashes them? And
That's a really good way to look at it. Thank you. I really appreciate that point of view, because you're absolutely right. If I look at his actual platform, which is not Project 2025,
right, exactly. Yes.
It actually does very clearly identify areas that would increase our individual liberty and go farther to protect it. Whereas, to be honest, Kamala is a bit of a cipher. She's telling us what she wants, and we heard a lot about what she and the Democrats believe, like we were in church.
Right.
But there's not even anything to hold her to that says, on paper, like she has plausible deniability. Anything she decides to do, if she gets elected, we'll see what happens in the debates. That'll be very interesting, but there's still not a platform. All we know is the history of what she has supported in the past, which is anti-liberty, and we know what her lineage is in terms of her father and her own commitment to so-called equity and coming out in the same place and all this nonsense. And so I don't hear anything to persuade me that she is not at least personally a Marxist. And then she surrounds herself with, or allows herself to be surrounded with and run by, because I don't think she makes a lot of her own decisions, run by globalists and people who are really not interested in allowing us to be the United States of America as we know ourselves to be. Like, forget our sovereignty, forget our economy being a free market economy. No, I don't see her making any moral case for any of that whatsoever.
That's an interesting point. I had only considered that she was inviting mega donors and billionaires on stage while bad mouthing them the entire time, but yet she didn't address WEF. What does she think about Soros? What does she think about Klaus Schwab? I'm pretty sure we know what Trump thinks about the WEF and Schwab and their glorious degrowth plans. So as far as if you had to write a column, say a spreadsheet with that question, just two columns up top. Does this support individual liberty? Second column would be, does it support government or expansion of governments, whether they be domestic or foreign? And on the side, put the policies that we've had. We did have tax cuts. That was a correction. Price controls that slipped out of Kamala's campaign. So we at least have one, tentatively one.
No, hasn't she wheeled that one back a
Has
lot
she?
since she's had so much backlash on it? Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't aware. But does that mean
Yeah,
it's bad for business right now? And
no, that's exactly right. I think that's still, because I think that she's not talking about it, but that's a policy of hers. It just wasn't well received. And so when she gave her speech at the DNC, she didn't address it, didn't even come up, because it doesn't pull well across the spectrum.
I don't trust that
And
a
so
bit. I mean, what I'm saying is,
right.
remember the speech where Rick Warren and Barack Obama were sitting on the stage. Now, mind you, I support gay marriage. It's fine. I don't have an issue with it. But there he was sitting on the stage, and he was asked point blank about marriage, and he said it's between a man and a woman. He did not support gay marriage. There were so many things he said, and he was unequivocal. And then he got elected. And it was like you flipped a switch and out came the guy that, if you look back at his Illinois Senate record, it was all there.
You know, that's something we need to hang on to as well. What I mean is how the Harris campaign, is couching this as a new thing. Oh, yes, I'm in there now. I've been in there for 3.5 years, but no, 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 no. What I'm talking about is something brand new. When you get me in power, I can do this thing. Uh, what degree of credibility?
Well, I think that's why they didn't go the 25th route, because then she would unequivocally be the incumbent. And, even though it's only a few months, it's still an incumbency versus, even though she would have 2 terms left to her, it's still this idea that she is effectively she is the president. And there's a different way of looking at it. I think they're desperately trying to make it out like she is this brand new candidate and doesn't have any, history. They're trying to do 2 things at once. Look how experienced she is, but she's not responsible for all the things they didn't do. It's like, well, then what was her experience exactly?
That's slick. I love it. That's a good point. It's a great point.
So, I mean, she's a non-starter for me. Like, the idea. I've had people say to me, "Well, if you don't vote, so you're a Kamala supporter, so you're a libturd," and all these things. I'm like, no, I'm not any of these things. And my problem is I don't see myself really represented. I came as close to seeing elements of myself in that speech yesterday, in terms of, he made it so clear that Americans as individuals cannot make informed choices when we're being lied to.
That's right.
There's one point that came across so clearly, and I've been trying to make this point even to fellow libertarians, and I say fellow, even though I'm not in the party, just like other people who think like me. I've been trying to make this point because they'll say, well, just go sue. Well, you want to take away people's right to eat junk food, whatever. I said, it's not really a right if you don't know what's in it. If you don't know that there's microplastics in your food, if you can't tell that you're eating something that's effectively not food, then how are you really going to assert yourself and your individual right to, do that? And then when you give pharmaceutical companies immunity, the people have no recourse. They could just, lie. So he articulated that better than anybody I've heard do in a very long time.
It was impressive.
Yeah. Who else would like to speak? Anybody else have a thing to say?
Yeah.
Liberty Wolf and Hemisphere.
Okay. Hi there, Deb.
Hi.
I am in here really just to listen. So, I am on the evil side with Kamala now. And so, but I'm in here to listen. And because it's not a perfect choice. And, I make it somewhat reluctantly, but I just can't go for Trump. I'm just tired of the chaos. I don't trust him as a person who is trans, meaning I transitioned from female to male 35 years ago. I don't trust that my right to health care won't be infringed upon. And also as a writer who has written a memoir, been published, I'm primarily a poet, but I've written a memoir that was published in 2006, and I've been in many movies, whatever. I don't trust that Project 2025, I know you say it's not his agenda, it's not his platform, but I don't trust that it's actually not going to become reality to some degree or the other and end up, they want to put so-called pornographers in prison, and they associate pornography in Project 2025 with so-called transgender ideology. And, I'm not suicidal.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say to that is, in addition to the fact that it's a heritage document, not a Trump document, and it's what their intentions are as far as lobbying goes, I would also say that this is where Trump's background as a Democrat and he's made no noises whatsoever to indicate he has any stomach he said he's absolutely against a national ban on abortion. And then I don't think he has the stomach for using the federal government to tell people how to live at the state level. Now, you might be amongst the people who says, I want someone to use the federal government to prevent states from allowing their local, their legislators, whatever, to make laws against, let's say, men and female sports. But he's taken a pretty firm stand that he doesn't want the federal government to get involved in those things.
Yeah.
And I take him at his word. And part of that, it stems from the fact that he has a long history of having a lot of friends and associates and acquaintances, whatever, who are in, adult entertainment and a lot of different things.
Very
I just don't think he
important.
has the stomach for getting down in the weeds of this kind of moral stuff. That's a heritage thing. Heritage Foundation, as we know, it's very much more to the right on those things. And I just don't think that'd be more a thing I'd worry about JD Vance than Donald Trump. But I respect you sharing your views here and what you're listening for. And I appreciate your,
I'm curious.
To share.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm just listening.
That's fine.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm standing now. And unless something, and I understand that he may not do it. God, I hope not. I hope that he really does, disavow so much of the limits on personal liberty that are in that document. I respect people's religious views, but I don't want them imposed upon me.
Hey, can I say something? I don't respect your opinion, because you're asking the rest of us to basically put all of our personal liberties, something that I would like to think you have a penchant for, and gamble them on your feelings.
What are you talking about?
No. You talked already. You said you wanted to listen, but you've done mostly talking. Trump has been president. He did not get in the way of anybody from the LGBTQ community who is an adult doing whatever the hell they wanted. You are asking us to join you based on your feels.
No, I'm
not asking. That's ridiculous.
I
find it offensive.
No, okay. I'm not. I find you offensive. I find your attack out of
nowhere
go
ahead.
Offensive. You don't know me. Right? You don't know me. You know
I don't need to know
me.
you. You stated your point, and it's idiotic.
Well,
okay, guys,
yours is pretty idiotic too, sir.
Can we keep it civil? I really just want to. Yeah. I just want to keep it civil and keep it to what people's individual thoughts are. Everybody has the right to say what they want to say.
Yeah.
I just don't want to devolve into personal attacks. We can disagree on various points.
I have a question for Liberty Wolf, if I may interject.
Yeah.
Liberty Wolf?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hey, what was the when you began speaking?
Yeah.
You what was your hesitation with Trump at the very first part, if you recall?
Well, I voted for him twice. I wasn't so sure, the first time around, but I voted for him, and he turned out to be a lot better than I thought he was. I voted for him the second time. Yeah, and I'm a registered Republican, and I lean libertarian. I don't think I'm a true, pure libertarian. I think of myself more as a classic liberal. But I definitely, on the political tests, I come out either center-right going towards libertarian or center-left going towards anarchy, right? So depends on the test. But yeah, I mean, I'm just tired of. There's a lot of chaos around Trump.
None of that
There's a lot
true.
of division.
Okay, well, let me run a scenario by you, Liberty Wolf. Just entertain the idea for a little while. So what we have, if you're familiar with the idea of a dialectic, you have...
Of course.
Okay, great. So what we see with current law, I'll use the Ten Commandments legislation as an example. So when progressives hit folks on the right with a new venture, some new policy, some new initiative, there's oftentimes a reaction, and that's intentional. The reaction that we had a few months ago was you guys are banning porn books, or however it was caged. We're going to put the 10 Commandments in a school. What does that do practically? Hardly anything. However, it's a fight, right? It's something that conservatives,
Hey, how's it going? Do you hear me? You guys hear me?
it's
Mhm.
Yeah,
something
I'm
we can
sorry.
hang on to.
I'm trying to like kind of play moderator here.
Right.
So
So,
I know
all right,
Hemisphere has been like chomping at the bit to get in here. So why don't
I'm
you?
sorry. Let me wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know
Liberty
what
Wolf.
the topic
Now,
is, but I
consider.
apologize
I'll
if
just
I
try to wrap
overspoke
that up
someone.
if I
Yeah. Go
can.
ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
If I can, for Liberty Wolf.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Consider, as I said before when talking with Deb, who has a track record of enabling your individual choices, and who, consider if leftists take control of policies and make censorship, government down censorship, a thing.
Uh-huh.
When you become somebody, say the worst version of JD Vance gets in power and uses that policy to censor you, then it will be a bad thing. Right now, it's not a bad thing because mostly it's conservatives. But if the law can be introduced and used against you when you become the minority, that's the party to vote against. And what I'm trying to suggest is that Trump is the one that's going to preserve those individual choices.
Yeah. Well, in a way, we're all between a rock and a hard place because I have been canceled by the left already.
Okay.
I'm a poet and I had a book of poetry that was published in 2019. And, it wasn't sent out to all the cool reviewers, the people who were going to review it. They were getting in touch with my publisher and saying, even though they really liked the book, they liked the actual work, which was not political at all, because I generally do not write political poetry or identity-based poetry. But they decided they weren't going to publish. Rather, they weren't going to review it because of my views on the Black Lives Matter.
There we go.
Yeah, right. Because I'm not a Marxist, right? I mean, long time ago, when I was a kid, when I was like in my 20s, I was a Marxist. I was a communist, right? Like a lot of people my age who lived in San Francisco. But I've come a long ways since then. So yeah, there's the tyranny
So
of the
you can
left.
see,
Oh
you
yeah,
can see the
absolutely.
harm of a progressive ticket.
Oh yeah, that's why I switched to the GOP, which in San Francisco, where I was living at the time, is like being, a Satanist in a Catholic church. You don't tell people, you don't even tell your friends.
That's true.
It's totally bizarre.
All right, let's
So
hear.
again, purity versus pragmatism.
Let's hear from Hemisphere and see what they have to say.
Hey, I have a little bit to say. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the time and the opportunity as well. So sorry I'm repeating myself, but I'm a Trump supporter as well. But I'll be honest with you guys. Like, one of the things that's concerning to me is, uh, you know, uh, too much support of another country, a foreign country, and as an American, we should be America first. We should be patriots. We should look for our own benefit of how we're going to progress in the world, right? So I feel like we're getting too intertwined with different entities, foreign entities, and I'm not isolating one specific country, but there's several countries now that we're supporting, and our countries are physically and financially supporting with their tax dollars for these countries, and I would say even our government has a lot of like I would say even dual citizenship with these foreign countries. So for me, I'm concerned with Trump in that aspect where he's not acknowledging that as the Trump that I know from 2016. Um, Trump 2016 would have said that bluntly, but now I feel like there's a little bit more watered down Trump because of he lost in 2020, which I don't think he lost.
Is
I
everyone
don't think he
there?
lost, but I feel like there's a disconnect now from 2016 to 2024 Trump, which is
Right.
not the Trump that I know to grow and love. And it's unfortunate, but as you know, it's a politics game. It's all
Sure.
about money, lobbying, right? It's all about influence, which I totally understand.
So
But
but you're definitely voting for him. You're not like on the fence. You're just concerned. These are your concerns
yeah,
about.
and you know what?
Okay.
The reason why I say this is it actually might be the tipping scale of if we win or not, because there's people on the fence, Democrats on the fence, where they're listening to, Harris, and they're listening to Trump, and they're like, oh, well, this person is, talking about minorities and gonna help this, and just talk. It's not real work that they're doing, just talk. And then Trump is being too much of a foreign entity, and they can use that against Trump. And I'm worried that Trump is not focused on domestic relations. That's really important, and he's going outside his realm of foreign entity support, which the domestic people, which are very hindsight, very direct, tunnel vision people, where they're thinking, hey, I care about my bills, I care about what's going on for my job, my sales job, whatever it is, my
Yeah,
so
I get it.
and those are the things Trump should focus on, and be America first and be more domestic, right? And
Well, I think to a certain extent we're gonna have to wait to that next debate, because if you recall, in the first debate he was debating Joe Biden, and he did bring up some of this stuff, but it was such a staged. They were trying so hard to make Joe just like survive the debate, and it didn't go so well. And then I think when he stands up against Kamala Harris, it'll be very telling, because that will be a golden opportunity for him to talk about how he's different from her in terms of these policies. And I certainly hope he's getting a lot of coaching in that regard and listening to people about some of these issues, because as you point out, there are some very important areas of differentiation. And honestly, I think he could spend the entire debate just pointing out. I wouldn't even go at her so much as I would go at how he's going to restore America to Americans. And in terms of, we talk about protecting the border, we talk about this fraud that's going on in our different agencies that are basically screwing us all over. I hope he talks about all the foreign money in education. I hope he talks about getting rid of the Department of Education, and because it's just bribing the states to do, for UNESCO's bidding. It's not even doing Washington's bidding. It's this global, cabal.
yeah, just to cut you off, there was a video of Donald Trump in like 1986 or 7, and he was on, I think, a talk show, and he said, why are we spending all this money in foreign aid? How come they're not paying us? How come they're not supporting us for all the money we're spending and protecting them? This is 1980,
Right.
and he said that in 2016. He said that in 2016, same platform, same agenda, policy agenda. And that's what won him the election in 2016.
That's what he
And
has to
when he
do in
got
that
into office,
debate.
hold on. When he got into office, he actually implemented that, and he got countries to pay the NATO bill, their defense bill. And
Yeah.
for me as a taxpayer, my money's coming back to me because I'm not paying that extra whatever it is for those defense bills of foreign countries. So if Donald Trump comes back to that Donald Trump of 2016 and 1987, before he was actual presidential candidate, I feel like we'll be in a better place economy wise, and
Mhm.
our bankrolls will be better. But
Mhm.
if the policy we're going to continue to support, foreign entities, whether it's in Europe or Middle East, then we're definitely going to be in the same place where we're at with this current administration, because that's where all our bulk of our money is going to, is there, not here domestically.
Okay. Who would like to pick up there? Anything you want to add to that, or thoughts about what hemisphere? By the way, can you put your hand down? You see how there's like a little emoji thing. You can actually remove that so that it's not looking. Okay, there. Thank you. All
Yeah,
right.
I had to. I didn't even see it on my side. I
No,
did
that's
it
okay.
twice. Yeah.
That's okay. So, who would like to speak? Anyone? Anyone? Feel free. If you want to speak and you're not made a speaker, I try to invite everybody to speak, but you can also send me a request. I mean, to echo what Hemisphere was saying in terms of speaking about some of these policies, I do think it's very important, and I don't know if anyone agrees, that Donald Trump, especially now that RFK has come over and endorsed him, I think it is very important that he start making the positive case, the affirmative case. This is something that Reagan did very, very well, and he should just be sitting and watching like hours of Reagan speeches. He did a fantastic job of making the moral case for America, for, you know, that shining city on the hill, whatever. And it sounds cliche at this point, but we have got to wake people up again to what is good in America. Americans do want to feel good about their country, no matter what people say. They, you know, and that is what, I hate to say it, that's what Harris was trying to harness at that DNC with her BS joy and all this crap. There were people coming out of there, even though we know it was like a church revival, they were coming out of there going, I feel so positive and so good and whatever. And that's tragic that that pablum actually resonated, and that all of her liberty, anti-human things that they were doing there still came off as, look how joyful we are. But he absolutely cannot let her have that high ground. He cannot come back with negative, because people, like, they are desperate to feel good. And as much as we can kind of, make fun of that, that's something that Donald Trump actually could be very good at. He's really good at getting people whipped up into feeling happy, feeling positive, feeling good. That's why his rallies are so popular. And I think that if he uses a debate and if he uses other speeches and other opportunities to make the case for American greatness, rather than, oh, it's doom and they're dragging us down and we're going to be Venezuela and all that stuff. It's all true, but I don't think we want to talk about that. That's just my take. I mean, maybe people have different opinions. Ethan, maybe you have a different take on that.
Well, what I was wondering, not to get too far afield, is how have you been responding to people from the independent or libertarian camps who push on you? What are you saying right now?
Well, my argument has been, and I don't think it's been a great one now that I've heard yours, about who is actually looking to improve our liberty, actually going, looking to use federal force against us versus not, is a better argument. Than what I've been saying is, because the arguments I hear back is, you want to reduce people's choices and you want to use authoritarianism to prevent people from using whatever drugs they want, or, and buying the junk food and all this. And what I've said is, I am all for people having the liberty to choose to eat poison junk food if they want. Okay. But right now they don't know that it is poison. Oh, come on. You mean to tell me? I said, no, you go try to do a Google search and find out the truth about seed oils right now. Good luck. You want to get some actual medical evidence that these the statin drugs are potentially bad for you. You have to go to YouTube, and even there they get censored half the time. So people have to go to such huge lengths to educate themselves, and they still don't know what is true, because the agencies that claim that they are the last word on science and medicine and truth are straight up lying to us, and have been for a long time. And so don't come at me with, well, people have to make their own choices. From what? Amongst what? A bunch of lies? Like, we can't tell what's true anymore. So unless we're going to do something about that, then holding people accountable to make their own decisions when they don't even have the right information seems very dismissive. And I told them, I said, if you want people to listen to you, you cannot dismiss their concerns, and you cannot dismiss that it's 10 times harder to just pay your bills today. You don't have time to do an exhaustive research project on what the right food or drug is for you. We should be able to trust the friggin' people who claim that they're reviewing all this crap.
I would also throw in there that to some degree, the federal government does have a responsibility. I retired military. I retired from the DOD as a civilian, and always present is the idea of a federal government who will defend against enemies, foreign and domestic. That extends all the way down to spouse abuse. Yes, the government has a duty to step in and have solutions available for preventing spouse abuse, for preventing rape in parks and so forth. That's defense.
No, I agree. And then especially if you're going to tell people you must pay a tax,
Right.
for whatever it is, military, police, blah, 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 blah. And then you're going to like opt out of enforcing the laws that protects people's civil rights. Like that's just,
right.
this is a problem. And so what of course they come back with, well, you shouldn't be paying the tax in the first place. Okay, super. And I would love to have a pet unicorn, but we're not at that. That's not going to happen. And so we need to look at where we are, and where we are is that we're taxed for these things. And then government is picking and choosing winners and losers and who's going to get protected and who isn't. And they're doing it along political lines. And if this is the world that my children and I are living in, then yeah, I'm going to probably lean towards the candidate who acknowledges my reality, the reality that is, not the imaginary fantasy world that I would love to live in where, you know, we don't pay all these taxes, and then says, all right, you know what, we're going to pick to take care of Americans before people who snuck in across the border. We're going to pick to take care of, enforcing laws that were violated by violent criminals, not pick and choose because they had a tough childhood or something.
They are not coercive laws. They're only coercive laws if you harm or threaten to harm other people.
Right.
Which is punishment, which is judicial practice. This is normal practice. So instead of it being couched as, well, criminals are being forced to have these crazy sentences. Okay, well, I could either have defense or I could have insecurity. And that's the pendulum, right? The privacy versus safety pendulum. The more liberty I have, the more I am free to do whatever I want to do. The more security I have, the less restrictive, or the more restrictive the federal government is to me.
Well, there's
So
also predictive security and responsive. And we always understood that, for example, the police are not there to predict crimes. They're not
Right.
even there to
Right.
prevent crimes, but they are there to respond when criminal activity has occurred and to go out and find the people who violated your rights and then punish them accordingly, or try to make you whole if that's possible. And that is supposed to create a deterrent and so forth and so on. But
Yes.
what I see happening is, at least on the current left, the modern left, they want to do more predictive technology and surveillance. And they want to use really creepy things like, this kind of person is, a bad kind of person, whether they decide it's white people, whether they decide it's rich people, whether, whatever. They've made this whole hierarchy, intersectional hierarchy of who's good and bad. And then they want to make certain predictive pronouncements and write coercive laws to restrict the freedoms of those supposedly always bad people. And then when it comes to somebody who actually does violate one of the laws that our representatives have written and passed for us, then they go into this whole like equity justice, like, well, they were this, they were that, reasons, blah, blah. And we have this two-tiered system. And so do I think there are too many laws? Yeah. Do I think that police are often overzealous? Absolutely. There needs to be a whole retraining and reform of police. I think we need to deal with, what's it called? Qualified immunity and in the schools too, by the way.
For sure.
But at the
Civil
same
rights.
time, if we've got a party that says we're going to be libertarian when it comes to these kind of people, like our kind of people,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
not all people, that's
Absolutely.
tyranny. It's just a different kind of tyranny.
Something I stumbled on last week was, if you can find a policy that has a specific affinity group, I can almost guarantee you it is a progressive policy. Because their policies pick winners and they have favorites.
Right.
Someone is left out. So if you can identify an affinity group, you have a progressive policy.
Now that can be a progressive policy from Republicans too. So that's the challenge.
This is true. This is true.
Yeah,
Sure.
we've had, even to the extent that income tax is, a progressive income tax. Well, that does favor certain people over other people. And people say, well, that's justified because they're rich and whatever. And it's like, well, is it though? I mean, you really like explain why the government, guys with guns, have some kind of inherent authority to take property from people who have a lot of it versus people who don't. If you shouldn't take other people's property, you shouldn't take other people's property. You don't decide based on who you think has enough. And this is one of the things I heard at the DNC a lot was somebody standing there who has more than one mansion, but one of them is like a $29 million mansion, saying, sometimes I'm suspicious of people or my mother said to be suspicious of people who have more than they need or take too much or whatever. And I'm like, excuse me? Who are you? You're not God. You don't get to decide who has too much. Like, who made you the perfect person and judge of other people? So if we're gonna think about policies like let's not judge how people live their lives, that guess what? That goes for rich people too. If they're not otherwise bothering you and they're not using their riches to literally harm people, then it's not the role of government. So this is what I look at. Now, one of my concerns about Trump, and this was one of the reasons I was definitively not going to vote for him, was I was really angry about the spending. I'm a fiscal conservative, very much so. And I saw that spending, and I just, in his approach to debt and deficit spending, and I just wanted to puke, because I see what this is doing to us. And we were set up for this inflation to a certain degree because, what do you do if you don't cut spending? You've got to print money. And once you print, what do you like? It just, that bothered me. And I really would love to hear some more about fiscal responsibility, but we're not going to get that from Kamala for sure. So that's where your argument is a better argument. Because the one I get from libertarians all the time is, well, he's going to spend us more in oblivion. I'm like, and Kamala's not, like, at least along the way, we might get some movement to cut some things we don't need anymore that could cut some spending. Like, that's a positive. She wants to add and add and add and add and steal some more. So I don't see how that's even an argument against him anymore. I really don't. Initially, I was like, yeah, I can't forgive this. But the more time went on and the more I heard from her, the more I was like, my argument is moot, because she's going to take us to Venezuela inside of a year if she gets even half the stuff she wants.
Well, even consider if price controls are a thing.
Well, forget it. We're going to be online at the grocery store. Forget it.
Well, there has to be a bureaucracy. There has to be an organization that's in charge of that. They have to branch out with chains of responsibility to local farmers. There will need to be new bills. It is a bureaucratic nightmare what's being proposed. Might as well be another branch of agriculture. You'll have to regulate supply chains and warehousing.
And they did such a great job of that during COVID, didn't they?
Right,
So
right.
it's there. I see dissident teacher here, and she could attest to this, that if only we'd taught history, if only people actually knew how many of these things had been tried. Even in my own lifetime, Nixon instituted price controls, and I remember going to the grocery store and there was no meat. So it is really astounding to me how much our horrendous education policies and system have rendered us so dumb that we can't even recognize suicidal policies when they show up. All right, who's speaking next? Everybody be nice. Debatenstein, you could speak, but you could be nice.
Look, okay.
Try.
I'll be nice.
Try.
I'll be nice. Here's the thing, everybody. You can talk about Trump did this, Trump did that. I didn't like that he voted for this. I didn't like the way he talked about so-and-so. We can go over this ad nauseum. The fact of the matter is, we are trapped in a jungle with a gaping, open, bleeding leg wound and a bottle of vodka. That's where we're at.
Pretty much, yeah.
Our choices are drink the vodka and die, and that's what you do if you vote for Kamala. Or you pour the vodka on your open leg wound and you try to limp back to the promised land. That's a vote for Trump. There is no gray area. There's no other place to go. Those are our two choices. Now, you can stamp your feet and say, I don't like it, and that's fine, but that will accomplish nothing. That's the kind of narcissistic thinking that the left loves so much. So hate Trump all you want. This isn't about feelings. It's about the survival of our republic. We have the choice between someone who is an actual communist and someone who's not.
Yeah, I mean,
That's it. That's
that's
everything.
That's kind of the conclusion I'm coming to. I mean, the DNC was clarifying, but then having somebody like, and I don't doubt for a second that the trifecta of the lawsuits against him to keep him off the ballot, which I cannot imagine how frustrating that has been, but the lawsuits that the Democrats have been peppering him with, well, both candidates, both Trump and RFK, but definitely RFK. And then the DNC and the stuff that she was saying. And remember, he, being a Kennedy, and he comes from this long line of Democrat, politicians, and his uncle and so on, and his father. It had to have been hard listening to an actual communist take a shit all over the party of his uncle and his father. And
exactly.
And so I think those couple of things, plus Trump very strategically, like I said at the outset, I don't know if you were here yet, I said this showed me tremendous growth on Trump's part, that he is starting to think like a politician. Much as I don't like politicians, if you're gonna be one, you gotta be one. Like you need to understand the dirty, rotten game of building alliances and coalitions, and you do have to figure out how you're going to strategize against your enemy. And so if he had extended his hand to him, even though he'd said not nice things about him in the past, and we know that they disagree on a lot of stuff because of these issues where he, I think, correctly surmises that you're hard pressed to find an American that's happy with our health care system. You're hard pressed to find an American who thinks our food supply is awesome, and that our obesity crisis and the sickness amongst our children and the autism rates are a good thing, regardless of party. So I think that showed me that this is somebody who, as old as he is like maturing a little bit. And then
100%.
And I do like the fact that RFK would be involved, because I think he is smarter intellectually, and I think he knows a lot more about these issues, and I just hope they listen to him. So that's kind of where I just, that sealed the deal for me, I guess, as far as being, I wasn't against it anymore. I wasn't really like nose holding. Now it's kind of like, all right, now I'm just reluctant. I'm doing it. I wish, like you said, my feelings don't matter at this point. It kind of is what it is, but I'm getting a lot of flack. And I didn't expect that. I thought I'd be able to make arguments, and that at least I'd hear from people close to me who mostly are libertarian, right? That they would say like, well, at least you're using reason, or at least, that's, you do what you want to do. And that's not what I'm hearing.
Well, but that is my big beef with the Libertarian Party in general. They used to be the sort of Martin Luther of political parties. They were about common sense, and they were about, pragmatism and getting the job done. Whereas now it's become about the party. And isn't that what we all hate? Don't we all hate people who love the party more than the country? Mm-hmm. I don't know when or where you're ever going to find a more libertarian friendly presidential candidate than Donald Trump. He's one of the most moderate Republicans I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm 55 years old. And by the way, people love to get on his case for being on good terms with North Korea and with Putin, and with being able to shake hands with your enemy and tell them that you can respect them, being able to reach out to someone like RFK and be like, look, I disagree with you on a lot, but I think you've got some valid points. Isn't that what we all want?
Well, yeah, I don't know about the North Korea thing, but yeah.
No, but that is why they respect him, and that is why they're afraid of him, and that is why they don't respect people like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, and never will. Trump will come at you with a handshake, and then if you screw him, he'll screw you twice as bad.
Well, and it's a power handshake. Let's face it. That's the other thing is people misread that. His handshake. If you
the pull, the shake and grab.
If you
right.
watch him shake hands with people, that is a power move, and it
Fuck
sends
yes.
a very clear message to the person on the receiving end of that handshake.
Deb, I'm just curious. Of course, price controls are a recipe for disaster, but what about tariffs? What's
I'm
your
against them.
feedback?
I'm against them. I think it's a tax on the people buying the goods that are, getting that have the tariffs. It's a punishment to the people on this side who need those raw materials that are going to have a tariff. If it's a raw material or some good that they sell, it ends up being a tax on the end user. So I'm against them. So there are a lot of things that Trump says he wants to do that I'm not for.
Yeah.
But as Ethan pointed out earlier in the conversation, when I'm looking at, which of these two people is more likely to use coercively to force, property away from me that is the steal, just straight up steal directly from me, and also pick and choose winners and losers based on race and based on all this other arbitrary garbage that basically is very Soviet style, big brother, the party over the people. I think I look at Kamala and I look at all the people that support Kamala, because not just her. The thing about the Democrat Party that I've observed in the last, really since Obama, is that it really is a machine, and that each of these people who rises to the top is chosen by the party. It's more like the Soviet Union than it is like the old American Democratic Party. And even then, the smoky back room where they picked, Harry Truman, is preferable in a weird way to what they do now, where, as you pointed out, they're global interests, they're mega corporations, billionaires. There are influences that have absolutely nothing to do with the American people and aren't even Americans, who are handpicking a puppet, and then the machine runs the country.
Yeah.
And that is something that I don't see with Donald Trump. I don't see him being owned
Well,
by
that's
foreign
true.
entity. And so
That's true.
and that to me is very important. I think that's a very big thing. Flawed though he is, somebody said it in the earlier show, like, I'd rather have a well-meaning kind of buffoon who isn't owned by somebody else and at their beck and call, than somebody who is, literally a puppet of people we don't know and they have no accountability to us. And we don't even look who's running the country right now. Who is running the country as we are having this conversation?
Right.
We do not freaking know. And that's very typical of the Democrat Party. And that is one of the reasons they make me super nervous.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has become more machine-like in the past, since Obama, probably a little before Obama. That's definitely true.
That's kind of my take on it. As far as, do I like the tariffs? No, hell no. And what I hope, of course, is that if he were to win, that somebody would pull him aside. I don't know, maybe like a Vivek or somebody, and pull him aside and be like, dude, you can remember George W. Bush? He tried steel tariffs. How'd that work out?
Right.
He's not going to do it.
Okay.
It's all about the threat. That's what I love about the guy. He has said to Putin and other leaders, look, you mess with us, I'm going to bomb your house. He's not really going to bomb their house, but he needs them to think he's going to bomb their house. It is a threat, and I like that this guy is willing to make threats on our behalf. And I like that the other despotic leaders of the world are scared of this guy. I like that. That's how it should be. He's not going to impose tariffs. He wants the threat to be there, and he wants them to be scared of him. And that's what I want to.
All right. Anybody else like to voice a thought here? Have anything to add to this?
I have a question for Liberty Wolf. And I do want to say thank you for sharing your story. You mentioned that you have voted for Trump twice, and that you are on the other side of things and on Kamala's side here this go around. And I thought I heard you say it's primarily because of healthcare. So I was curious about that, and if you could elaborate on it a little bit.
It's primarily because of Project 2025. I just don't believe that. I mean, he claims he doesn't know anything about it. I think J.D. Vance wrote the foreword, Kevin Roberts foreword to a book that Kevin Roberts was going to put out, which is being delayed. There's just too many threats, real threats to liberty in there, speaking about liberty, which is important to me, and to my personal liberty, as a writer, as a provocative writer, as a trans person, yes, I'm female to male, meaning that I transitioned from female 35 years ago. And, people don't always know what that means. So, but, and I'm kind of known. I'm not known in my daily life. Nobody can tell. So, I don't run around telling everybody. And I hate identity politics. I'm also part American Indian. I'm a treaty Indian on my mother's side, but she's from Canada. But and I absolutely hate identity politics. As an artist, I've had to deal with it. Yeah, there's censorship from the left. That's one of the reasons I gravitated towards the right. But I don't want to have to deal with frankly, I respect people's religious beliefs, but I don't want to have to deal, frankly, with the religious crazies on the right. And for a while, they seemed to be kind of in the background, and now they're coming to the forefront after Roe versus Wade was overturned, and I just don't want to have to deal with that with any threat whatsoever. I can't take any chances. I'm part of a very small minority that's relatively powerless. I know people think we have a lot of power, but I think actually, we could be left behind pretty quickly by, if it's not advantageous to whoever is in power, Democrat or Republican. So that's my problem with it. I also, I have some issues with Trump as he's kind of chaotic. I mean, that's part of it is I don't really trust him. I think he did a better job than I thought he would the first time around, because I did vote for him twice. But anyway, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think what I'm hoping is I don't know what that was.
Somebody's freaking out.
Okay.
Oh my God. Somebody's freaking out. Okay.
What? I don't even know what's happening.
Well,
so
somebody put a really bizarre,
totally inappropriate.
Yeah, very inappropriate little video up or.
Where is it? How
GIF.
do I get rid of it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh dear, I don't know how to.
Deb might know how, but
I
maybe.
think I see this thing, but I don't know how to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's weird.
It says shared by Michael Ronnie. I don't know who that is.
I don't either. I see this thing, but
do not click on it. Do not even accidentally click on it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, but what I've got to do is I've got to block this person. Oh, that's foul. Okay. Block. Maybe does that take care of it? I don't know. I blocked the person.
Yeah.
Oh, did it okay.
It's still there. It's still there, but I'll just ignore it.
I am so sorry, you guys. I don't know why someone would do that. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
All right.
Not good.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that I hope that that Donald Trump gets directly asked about Project 2020. I mean, they have been asking him a lot, right? And he has said, and he is right, that it is not his thing. He did not write it. He does not specifically support or endorse it. And it was put together by Heritage Foundation, and it was put together as a transition, their sort of dream transition plan of how they were going to try to exert influence on a Trump administration if he won, because they've known he's going to be the nominee since forever. So what kind of pressure they wanted to put on him if he should win. So I don't doubt that the people who did write it would love to go and tell him, this is what we want you to do. What I have heard him say more specifically about specific policies, though, is in direct contradiction of some of the things they want. And then when I look at that against his record, for example, back when he was running in 2020, his ambassador came here, which was the guy, the one I'm talking about. He appointed the first openly gay ambassador.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You remember? Okay.
Yeah.
So he came to speak before the 2020 election. He came to my hometown, and I went to hear what he had to say. And honestly, I would say 75% of the audience was gay. very clearly. It was LGBT, the rainbows everywhere. So, but I went with my daughter and my husband, and we were just curious to hear what he had to say. And I absolutely came away from that 100% believing that Donald Trump has zero stomach for interfering with the lives or even the healthcare of people in that community who are adults. Okay, certainly. Now, when it comes to the child issue, I think I am sufficiently convinced that he's equally committed to protecting vulnerable children under the age of 18 from manipulative, coercive, controlling people who would like to take advantage of whatever mental health challenges they're having going on. And there's lots of issues there, and at least delay any kind of medicalization until they are able to have informed consent above the age of 18. And that I haven't heard him say anything about some kind of federal ban. Maybe other people do know, but I know that he has backed the state bans, and I don't have a problem with that. And that puts me at odds, obviously, with Chase Oliver, who has opposed those state bans. And I think that telling people you need to wait until you're 18 is responsible medicine and responsible healthcare. I don't think it's rejecting people. I don't think it's abusive. I don't think any of those things. And that puts me at odds with some libertarians. It puts me at odds with people. But the people is in terms of the Project 2025, I think they would take it farther. And I don't see that Trump has the stomach for that.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right, Deb, because he could be elected. I think it'll be very close. So, I hope you're right. That's all I can say,
Yeah, well, we'll see. But I mean,
I understand. I know what you mean. I mean, apparently Trump was the first person to allow trans women in beauty pageants. He allowed trans women to be in his I think he has Miss Universe.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think it's really personal, but he's become a politician now to some degree, a very unusual one. And, he's playing the game.
I think if he commits to keeping the children protected and keeping men out of women's sports, he satisfies his base without going, into the realm of adult business and adult lives. And I don't think there's a strong push, even from, Trump voters, even from MAGA and so on. I don't think there's a strong push to interfere with anyone who's over 18 unless those people are trying to force their way into female spaces. I think he would be against trans men in women's prisons. I believe. I can't. I don't want to speak for the guy.
Yeah,
but I believe
trans women.
Yeah, but he only has say over the federal prisons, as far as I know. But I think he would look to maybe possibly supporting some kind of a ban on that, even at the state level, if he could. I don't know to what degree he has the authority.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing where I think ultimately, if he is who I think he is at this point, he's looking at it as biological reality. And as long as the candidate is saying, I recognize biological reality, that's very different from saying I'm anti-trans.
Well, it kind of is saying you're anti-trans. I think we're going to differ on that because...
Well, what I'm saying is in terms of pretending that a man who transitions to be a male to female, to say that person is a female versus that person is a trans woman. And so that's where I think when I'm talking about reality, I'm just saying that a person who has a history as a male should not be in the female prison.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it has a long, they've been in female prisons for like decades in some places, but I think they had to have all the surgery. And I think what's changed now, and which is really unfortunate, in my opinion, is that they let people maybe in California, and I'm a little confused on this. I don't necessarily know all the particulars. I think they allow people in California, I believe, to go in based on self-identification. However, I think it's not everybody. Not everybody gets in. So there are still, strictures and, there's still a gatekeeping process even there. So I think a lot of this is highly exaggerated. Some of it's taking place in the UK. And we get a lot of our information on this on the conservative side from the UK and frankly from radical feminists, okay? Radical feminists, I think people on the right, I've been trying to tell them for a long time, a lot of the pushback on this comes from the left, from the radical feminist left, which is very misandrist. And, you've got to sort of look at the history. And that's been going on since the 70s, a branch of radical feminism, not all.
Sure.
Not all.
there's no question, and
Yeah.
we've come up against that, and just defending the kids, we've come up against people who don't want us to link arms with people, or trans adults who want to fight the transitioning of children, because how dare you have a conversation with a trans adult? So,
Oh, right. Then there's those people, right?
I've
And
come
some of
up
those,
against
yeah,
that. I've come
yeah,
up against that, and I
yeah,
don't care for that either. I'm just trying to say, in terms of the candidates, we have a choice between Kamala, who is, and the whole Biden administration, who just seem to be almost flaunting and throwing in people's faces that they fully support gender theory, like queer theory being taught to our children, and
yeah,
kids at the age of 6 being asked for their pronouns, and
yeah,
socially transitioning kids without their parents' consent. In other words, we're talking about a very, very extreme version of being pro
right.
queer theory
Well, yeah,
versus people who are saying, hey, not loving all this. And I
right,
guess I feel like Trump is more in that second category. I don't
right.
see him as a person who wants to just erase.
I think that's true. Everything is so crazy now. I mean, the whole pronoun thing, I hate the pronoun thing. A lot of people like myself who are kind of classic transsexuals, I guess, we hate the pronoun thing. I never put pronouns. If you can't figure out my pronouns by hearing me speak or seeing me, then I'm doing something wrong, and nobody ever gets it wrong at this point. So, of course, it's he. And I mean, the whole thing is crazy with the pronoun stuff. And,
I got you.
so, there's a whole thing where the left, this is not left or right. Being a transsexual, doing a sex change, as they used to call it, is not left or right. It just is. And you can hate us from the left, like the radical feminists, some of them do, or you can hate us from the right, like certain social or religious conservatives do. It's really just a medical thing, and it's a personal choice for a number of, for reasons that are beyond the scope of this conversation, really. And, I wish it had been left at that. And I do blame the radical left, the people who are pro-trans, the trans activists, for making this into something kind of nuts with all the pronouns and so on. But the damage is done. The way I see it is the damage is done. And now we have to live, now we're trying to sort of sort out the consequences. And for people like me, it could be bad. What could happen to us if, something like Project 2025 gets through. And it's not just me. I mean, it's a very radical, right-wing, socially conservative, religious take on reality that I don't think most Americans share.
Well, then that's why I don't think it will work. I mean, what we have seen is we've seen the radical left exert an enormous amount of pressure on this current administration and win.
Yeah.
And whereas I've not really seen the same on the other side. Now, people might say, well, they got rid of Roe v. Wade. And well, there are lots of ways to look at that. Way back in the day, Lawrence Tribe, who's by no means a conservative, wrote an entire book about the Roe v. Wade decision and what a weak decision it was, and how, it was sitting duck for being overturned if Congress didn't do something. And that was written back in like the 80s.
Yeah.
So this is something that if people had really wanted to codify it from the federal level, the Congress should have taken it up. I don't think they ever did, because even the Democrats knew that the people back home in their home states oftentimes didn't necessarily want that at a federal law. And besides, it made great political fodder for both sides.
Right.
So I think what both of these parties have done for a long time, to the detriment of the American people, is sustain problems. They haven't even attempted to solve them. It's the claim that they care about the problem that gets them elected. It's very lazy, and it's really sneaky. But I don't think that there's been a lot of success on the right sort of political side for some of the more right-wing things. People want to make a lot of hay out of removing the books from the school libraries, but I'm sorry, that's a little bit ridiculous. If you'd asked somebody 10 years ago if people would be arguing for what is essentially pretty graphic pornography in a middle school school library, you would have thought that was crazy. In fact, I remember trying to tell people just a couple years ago that this was happening, and they told me I was imagining it. You're insane. This isn't happening. No one would do that. And then you show them the books, and what they now want to do is they want to make us out to be some kind of right-wing Nazis, because we don't want our 6th graders learning how to give a proper blowjob to an adult male. I mean, it's not appropriate. And that everyone should agree with that. I don't think like, that's why Gays Against Groomers came into being. They're like, wait. Now we're getting smeared as people who would support that, and we don't,
Right.
So I think I hope they overplayed their hand, and they want to make it into, oh, look, the right wing are coming. It's like, oh, you mean parents? You mean parents who
Right.
actually like want to protect their kids' innocence a little bit because they're kids? So I don't know that they're going to, with the exception of very extreme people, make a lot of hay with that. But that has been the argument. And yet, if I look at it on paper, there have not been really successful right-wing policies. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody tell me. Go ahead.
Well,
Who's speaking?
I think it would be, I think they would probably be struck down as unconstitutional, with First Amendment. They want to ban pornography. They've tried to do that before. And
that won't happen. That's just not going to happen. I mean, what the most they could maybe do is try to get it out of certain spaces.
Right.
But, even that is going to have an uphill battle in the court in terms of where the spaces are. If it's a private space, it's not their business. If it's a public space paid for by taxpayer dollars, they're also somewhat restricted because, taxpayers are paying for it. So
right. I will say one final thing on the Project 2025. It is supported by, I believe, 100 conservative organizations, including Tipping Point USA. So, and we have seen this sort of odd resurgence of weird thinking. I think they got it right on that, like where Charlie Kirk is arguing about whether or not women should have been granted the right to vote. Crazy things like that. I mean, people can argue that from a philosophical point of view, but I think it's alarming. I'm alarmed by that. I'm alarmed by the resurgence in that.
I think one of the things we have to acknowledge too is the demographic reality that Trump lost, supposedly. This is what I've heard. I don't know if it's true. And Romney before him as well, also, because they lost the white male vote. And people think it was women, but actually men have been so demoralized, supposedly, and a lot of them are just not voting, or they are voting for whoever's going to give them the most stuff, or they're, whatever. And a lot of them are going over to vote third party. And so it's not unlikely, I'm guessing here, I don't have any data to back this up, but it's not unlikely that you have a situation where this is red meat for a certain kind of person who spends his day, where on the internet and stuff,
right,
and just to try to get the votes. Now, I don't like it. I think it's low. I think as a woman, obviously I find it repellent.
Right.
But, I don't know. I'm curious what Dissonant Teacher has to say about any of this. So you've got your hand up.
Crap, I wasn't ready. I was just going to say,
be ready. Then let Jennifer go first and you can come back.
Jennifer, go.
Jennifer goes first and then you.
Sorry, I can't remember what I was going to say, except there was a section where when you were talking, I was like, that's the values versus virtues thing.
Yeah.
And I think that what has been so interesting for me to see is that more people on the right will openly talk about their virtues. I have a lot of friends on the left that share those same virtues when it comes to men playing sports with women, especially my friends that have daughters that are in the Democratic Party. But that's not the biggest issue for them, right? But it is an issue. And they don't like it, but they won't talk about it. And people on the right will talk about everything openly, and they're hoping to, inject some truth into the narrative that this is something most people agree on, but only one side will openly say it.
I see what you're saying. And I mean, and let's face it, I would be lying through my teeth if I didn't admit that there have been times where I sit there and shake my head and ask myself things like, what is wrong with so many women? And that's terrible. It's not flattering. I don't like that I've said that, but it just seems like this style of education that we've had since the progressives pretty much designed it.
Took over. Yeah.
It's been affective, or meaning like it's designed for feelings and emotions and all this other crap and not knowledge acquisition and so on. And that we have sort of feminized the way of looking at things, even beyond what actual women think. In other words, it's so stereotypical. It's a caricature at this point. And unfortunately, it's a caricature that a lot of women and men but it stands out more when it's women, in my opinion, have adopted. And that's where a lot of this misandry comes from. It's a lot of where this sort of like petty, passive aggressive, narcissistic, borderline-ish kind of behavior where it's like my feels, whatever. And it's stereotyping. We shouldn't do that. But I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And to your point, I think we have to talk about it. I think we have to openly say, hang on a second, maybe we're going too far to the side of feelings, and we're leaving out of the conversation the male virtues, the more masculine traits, which by the way are present in men and women. Again, these are all traits that we all have, just to varying degrees. And why are we preferencing? And I know why. We know why they're preferencing these more, agreeability and all that, all this agreeableness rather. And oh, what do you think? Well, I don't know. What do you think? Well, your feelings, this matters, because it's easier to lead people around by the nose when they're agreeable. It's easier to get them to deny their own ick.
That's
like that
exactly right.
feeling.
And that's the other thing I wanted to say. Thank you again, Liberty Wolf. I want you to know, just from a personal perspective, you said people on the religious right hate adults who have transitioned, and I have not seen that to be true. What that group of people is generally concerned about is the children and the ideology being passed onto the children without any parental authority.
Yeah, I don't think they all hate us. I have an evangelical friend actually, and she doesn't hate me, or she's not even in disagreement with what I've done. So I mean, I don't know how she squares that away, but that's sort of the way it is. But I'm just talking about the Project 2025 and the way it's being cast into law, or rather the hopefulness that certain people, and I know it's not everyone on the religious right, but I know there are people who are more live and let live. In fact, I will say this, I don't want to go on too long, but I will say that a while back, it used to be the left that gave me a harder time because I was too binary. I was too male, right? And for those who don't know, I don't know if anybody's come in since I transitioned from female to male. People get real confused about this, so I'll just reiterate that. And it was 35 years ago, but I was considered too male and too conventionally masculine, and they wanted, they were more into like this androgynous thing or non-binary thing or whatever. So conservatives were actually a lot more supportive. They were kind of like, you are who you are, and you've taken this journey, and you've got courage, and you're a pioneer. I used to hear all these things from conservatives. Not so much now because of, and I know a lot of it's a backlash to the left, to some overreach, but for whatever reason, it's really changed. And, that's why we're getting all these weird things like, this person putting this horrible, little graphic up there, and that didn't used to be the case with conservatives. They were more live and let live. So I'm just responding to the policies.
Sure.
Hey, Deb.
Yes.
I'd like to jump in real quick. I had my hand raised, but I must have taken it
please
off.
do. I mean, there's like 3. So I had called on the other 2 hand raisers and then they weren't ready. So by all means, go ahead. And I when there's hands up, I'm trying to do it in order, but whatever. Go for it.
Well, while Liberty Wolf was explaining things, I took a chance to download the Project 2025 document, ran it through my AI to help me isolate things. I don't see anything in there about affecting the rights or who can vote. There's nothing in there about women voting. This has come up. A friend of mine has hit me over the head with J.D. Vance is anti-woman voting. I said, find it. She came back about an hour later and apologized. And it drives me nuts. My recommendation as far as Project 2025 is concerned, keep in mind the Florida so-called Don't Say Gay bill that did not include any such language such as don't say gay.
Right.
Read the documents for yourselves. So I went through the Health and Human Services recommendations in here, and repeatedly what I see is do not create harm. And using my own rubric that I kind of a metric that I've been using in our conversation today is, does this prohibit federal overreach or does it expand individual liberty? And everything I've seen in the past 40 pages expands human or citizen rights. There's a lot of talk about transparency and processes. There's a lot of talk about how you can take your doctor who might not be in the network to create more competition with your network between an individual doctor that you choose, and almost forcing, well, I don't want to put words into it, but uh, I can't speak for the entire document, of course, but I would like to challenge anyone that says, well, Project 2025 does this, and this is not to slap you down, Liberty Wolf, but anyone that says Project 2025 says this, please go to the document. I can almost guarantee you, you're not going to find the allegation holds true. There
Yeah,
is
no,
no JD Vance in the
yeah, I
document.
just want to say real quick because I don't want to monopolize this, but no, I didn't say that it was
Okay.
saying women couldn't vote. I was just saying Charlie Kirk is talk. You know, it's just a lot of talk online and about women should never have been allowed to vote. You know, I mean, I'm seeing this movement on the right towards these sort of nutty frankly, what I think are nutty conversations. So,
Well,
and from somebody
on
like
the
Charlie
surface,
Kirk, who's an influencer, who's a prominent
yes, oh,
conservative.
certainly. Well, I have followed the conversation well, since my friend smacked me with that. I do want to say, though, there is no JD Vance. He did not write the forward to it. It's some individual with the last name of Roberts, I believe it is. I just stepped away, but JD Vance has nothing. His name does not appear in the credits. It
No,
appears nowhere in the
no,
books or the
he
shirt.
didn't. No, he didn't write the forward to that. He wrote the forward to Kevin Roberts' new book that's going to be coming out, which has been delayed. So I think he's, you know, I don't trust more. I mean, with Trump, I can see he's not really that invested in this personally, but with JD Vance, I'm like, I don't want that guy near the White House. I think he is more invested in these sorts of ideas. Um,
Well,
but
and
no,
I would
he
even
didn't write
suggest
anything
that
in Project 2025, to my knowledge.
though an individual may harbor some beliefs that may be, I think, unsettling to you or so forth, it's the policies that we have to look for.
Yeah, ultimately. I mean, I would agree
Yeah,
with that. Ultimately.
Yeah, I think we tend to do, and I do this too. We tend to look at what somebody's personal
that's
views
right.
are and automatically assume they want to legislate it. And
That's right.
I think it's really important for us to look at what do they put on paper, what do they say they want to make law,
Right.
and you know, other because otherwise it is America. I mean, there are going to be people who walk around holding ideas that I think are just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. But as long as you're not asking someone to put a gun to my head and make me believe the same thing or make me live my life the same way,
Right.
I really don't care. And you're not going to force my child to learn it in a school and that sort of thing. Then, you know, just you do you over there. And unfortunately, we've seen philosophically that people on the left have no such boundaries. In fact, they don't seem to forget respecting boundaries. They don't seem to know what boundaries are for. They seem to think that boundaries are like offensive and oppressive. And that's taking it to a whole new extreme. It used to be growing up that, you know, people who were left wing were like, you know, a little bit of control freak. Like they want you to do, you know, give to the common good and your money is our money, that kind of stuff. But now it's more like, how dare you disagree with me? You're an evil person. And they've taken it all the way to teaching our kids, quite literally. I mean, I encounter teenagers in the course of my work, and there are kids who are so emotionally dysregulated that they
Mhm.
genuinely believe if you disagree with them, you're
Mm.
hurting them.
Mm.
And this is and you can see like that you've seen some of the videos, probably those are obviously extreme cases and it's not as common to get that extreme, but there are people teaching them that. There are people teaching them that words are violence, and you're never going to hear that from somebody. For all my problems with the Republicans or problems with people on the right, I have never once heard somebody say my feelings trump your facts, and you know, like you have to agree with me in by law. Like there
Well,
are people telling me I'm going to
yeah,
hell. There are people telling me I'm
right,
going to hell.
right.
But okay, super. I guess I'll see you there too. You know, I mean,
Right. Right. No,
Well,
no, that's
there's
a
a
good point.
foundational
That's a
difference
good
that you
point,
hit
Kevin.
on there. The foundational difference is progressives it's a worldview. This is I love Thomas Sowell. I read Conflict of Visions years ago, and it's really helped me kind of categorize in my mind how groups tend to work. Progressives, by their very nature, think that man is essentially good, and that policies should be a policy is a thing that needs to be implemented to make people better. So
I,
it's okay to coerce good behavior.
if I may interject, let me just slightly quibble with you there. Progressives believe mankind, when
Mhm.
everyone's doing the same thing at the same time, is capable of utopia. But
Yes.
individual people are inherently just terrible. Like they'll make bad decisions unless better people tell them what to do. It's a very Platonic point of view. And conservatives, or at least in the vein of the classical liberals of our founders type of conservative, have traditionally felt like the Agent K approach, like individuals are smart, individuals are good, but
Mhm.
mankind, mobs, large groups of people assembled to make decisions, not so much. They tend
Well,
to
yeah.
engage in not so great behavior backwards.
Well, I would continue to push back on that, and the
Okay.
reason being is that at the foundation you have a conservative or a traditional like an Adam Smith and Ayn Rand, Hayek, where the point of contact between that foundation of their view of humanity is, and you see this all through their writings, humans left to themselves are self-interested and tend to do bad things. So that law is a minimum prohibition on bad activity. It's basically do no harm. I'm a medical person. Do no harm as policy. Policy making is a slow process. Democracy, on the other hand, is majority, chaos, rules. The law could change tomorrow if you can get 51% of the people to agree with it. That's a big deal. That's why it's important that this is a republic, not a standard democracy, or there's a better name for it. Uh, anyway, the point being, I am super tuned in to rejecting a policy that tries to make me better. Use this word, and it trickles down into society, and it happens in those groups that shame as their primary weapon. It's shame, it's humiliation. You should be ashamed. I can't believe you made a judgment on that. You called her a sleazy something or other. Who are you to say that?
Right.
Well, um, okay, but aren't you judging me by judging that? Uh, so,
Yeah.
but coercion, going back to coercion, I really think what I see with President Trump are expansions of individual liberty, and where they might be heavy-handed is on the are coming down hard on federal government overreach.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there are any exceptions. I've tried to keep my eyes open. Does anyone know if there are exceptions to that where President Trump, well, this particular policy comes heavy on liberty?
I'm unaware of any, and that was certainly never my issue with him. It's really funny that you've brought this up a few times, because you're
Mhm.
forcing me to think about this, and it's such a good point that all of my complaints were about money, like spending, and things where I
Mhm.
felt like he didn't do enough to get government out, but I didn't stop to think about the things that he did do to get government out of our business. In other words, it's kind of like, wait a minute, Deb, we had energy independence.
Mhm.
The border was working more efficiently. His policies were working. And whether it's, I don't know if a wall is, but, the policies he had of having the people have to apply in the country they came into, and all the different things that he had in place were absolutely working. And so, they didn't get talked about a lot because, well, obviously we know why they didn't get talked about a lot, because they were working. But instead of looking at those and the tax cuts, which I wish they were offset by spending cuts, but they weren't. I was being like, it's not enough. It's not enough. And you're making the point that like there was nothing he did. There was literally nothing he did that exerted force against me or anybody else. He kind of went the other direction. In fact, there was some prison reform under him as far as what, and so you're making me think about stuff where and this all happened while he was under constant attack. Like constant attack with the Russiagate and, verifying people's lies and all this other stuff. And you're
that is so mind blowing to me.
I
Yes,
know.
but
And so you're forcing me to realize like, wait a minute, I can barely get the 5 things I have to get done during the day. And nobody's like literally attacking me from every turn. So that's kind of, it's kind of a really good point. And I don't love all of the, the things like the Charlie Kirk, like what Liberty Wolf was saying. And I did want to share with you guys what Dissonant Teacher wanted to say, but didn't get a chance to, and then she had to go. Yeah, she said, she left me a note. She said, what I wanted to say is that all the right-wing groups are just as dependent on the state as left-wing public policy groups. Everything they say has to be taken with clear understanding that they have a vested interest in the status quo continuing, and that the feeling bullshit is all about allowing the state to become daddy and mommy to everyone. But where daddy is an absentee that pays for everything and mommy pays you pats you on the head and abandons you to the TV and plate of cookies and a bag of chips after affirming your widow feelings. So little, cynical view of it, that where the sort of very right wing and the very left wing groups, just as I said at the outset, are mostly, they want the ring of power for themselves. But if you have somebody who's an outsider who's saying, I don't want the ring of power, like I'm explicitly not looking to get the ring of power, but I'm gonna try to use the ring that we already have. Like in other words, there's power already vested in the federal government that was there long before Trump, long before anybody. You got to go back pretty far to unravel the imperial presidency. But if somebody's going to come in and say, all right, well, since I can't readily get rid of it all, this is here. Can we use this to restore freedoms? Can we use this to unravel some of this nonsense, to get rid of some of this? That's kind of where that's where I came down when I heard RFK speak. I heard him speak and I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that possibility. I really hadn't. And now I have this little glimmer of hope that maybe it could be done. And certainly it's a farce, even if it can't, even if it's like, we're still right where we are right now, but we're not moving towards communism. It's still an improvement over what she's proposing.
Well, the talk about House oversight of SCOTUS and the expansion of the seats,
that's terrifying to me.
Was like, oh my goodness, you are blatantly telling us you want to restructure the fundamental existing for 250 years structure of government. And once that's done, the founders were no dummies, of course. The brilliant people crafted this thing that is in a sort of dynamic tension on purpose. And now you want to dissolve that tension. What comes after that? And so, no, if you want to expand the ability of the federal government, whether it's judicial, legislative, or executive,
right,
and reach farther, no.
Yeah. That's definitely a fear of mine. And I think he did a good job with the court. Not the biggest Kavanaugh fan, but I don't like what happened to him, Right. But I feel like if they had their way with the court, it would be, they would fundamentally change. Now, a lot of things have to happen on down ticket races too. It's not just the president. And this is something else that I've brought up in my X account, that a lot of people are asking, even now on both sides, they want the president to be the king or the queen. And then that's another difference, is I don't necessarily think, although he had made some dumb statements in his first presidency where he like accidentally thought he had powers he didn't have. But I don't think Trump is looking for that. Whereas I definitely think the Democrats absolutely want that. I do believe they would like to get rid of federalism and have a strong central government that is actually defers to a strong centralized international government rather than to the people of the United States of America. I firmly believe that. One of the first things, I don't even think he was in office a week, Joe Biden signed us back up for UNESCO, all the UNESCO 2030 stuff for education. Why is that one of the very first things he does? And then gets us on board again with all this globalist crap. Like what? There were no other bigger priorities in the first week of office. And then you put in place a Secretary of Education who's literally advising school districts around the country to contrive ways to maintain a steady high level of funding for what was supposed to be temporary assistance for mental health impacts of COVID shutdowns. And now they're instituting permanent wellness garbage. And I just got a note today from somebody I know in California who I'm helping with some admin work. And this is what they are talking about. They are putting in place what they call coordinated care teams. This is for the public schools, California. Support services, direct quote, support services are coordinated and monitored rather than fragmented or operating in isolation. Support services are examined through the lens of equity and cultural competency. Oh, no. If a student has psychological or mental health issues that can't be sorted out, they have to go and find out what could it be something else? In fact, it says combat the disproportionate rate at which families of color are unnecessarily reported to and involved with child welfare systems by addressing racial disproportionality through improved training and decision support. Don't teachers have enough to do? Even school counselors, they're trying to make these things permanent. And it's pretty obvious why. If you can have the school become the center of life, that's why they call them community schools. If that is where you go and you become reliant on them for everything, your medical care, 2 meals a day at least, your psychological counseling, your dental care, all of these things, you'll never, ever, ever be able to do without it. And you become, look, what do I hear now from parents who say, oh, I don't like my school. What do I do? And I'm like, well, have you considered homeschooling? Oh, I couldn't possibly. They're completely dependent on that which has been, quote, given to them. But you get people like accustomed to this level of dependency. In fact, I have called it that my new name for it is sustainable dependency. And that's what I see happening on the left is they're cultivating sustainable dependency so that you're all basically serfs. And I do not see that on the right. I mean, for all of the religious right, blah, 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 I don't see most of the politicians saying, yes, you should be dependent on us for your sustenance, your very living.
They're quite the opposite, even.
Exactly.
Go do your thing. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. Just go do whatever.
That's called freedom. Yes. Liberty.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, and I guess I just don't, I cannot support people who think what's going on, for example, in California is normal. It's so not normal. It sounds like the Supreme Soviet when a friend of mine running for school district or for school board there was sent after you announce, you file your papers and you say, I'm running for school board. The different organizations, there's one called California Democratic Party. And they solicit you to see if you want their endorsement. So it's not like you go to them and go, hi, would you endorse me? They get your name and then they send you a thing saying, if you want our endorsement, here's what you have to do. This is a quote. Candidates must certify having read the platform of the California Democrat Party these are nonpartisan offices, these school board members, as it relates to office sought and note any substantive disagreements. Then it goes on to list that stuff about you have to commit to combating these disproportionate blah, blah, blah. Then it says candidates are placed on consent by 2/3 vote of the full membership of the screening committee. To be considered for endorsement, a candidate must have been placed on consent or be nominated for endorsement by 2 members of the central committee. Does this sound like Soviet Union? The committee. Any 5 members of the central committee, including at least 1 member from an assembly district overlaying the jurisdiction in which the candidate is running, may pull a candidate from a consent. Can you imagine even asking for this endorsement? What are you basically saying? I will be your stooge.
Yeah, it's a sponsorship. And if you behave wrongly or give the wrong public information, you lose your sponsorship.
Right. And this is for these school board positions are nonpartisan. They don't run as Democrats or Republicans or independents. They run as just people. And yet they solicit them. Would you like us to endorse you? And to me, this is just it's like one teeny tiny little vein on a leaf on the tree that is the poisonous, whatever of education in America. People think, well, the school board, or I'll just run for the school board, or that'll sort it out. Like, no, you don't understand how deep this rot goes. And when I trace its lineage, it always shows up back to the Democrat Party. And I'm not a partisan. I don't want to sit here and sound like, all Democrats are evil. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in terms of philosophy, in terms of their belief in what government is for, the role of government, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, whatever, they just fundamentally believe that there are people who know best.
That's right.
And you don't. You're not one of them.
That's right. Well, that's in line with rule or policy by virtue.
Yes.
And so if a policy is good to a progressive, it means there's an affinity group and that this broadcasts some sort of social capital. And if you're supportive of the bill, you have a certain sort of social capital that you can tout and say, yes, I support this bill.
Right. And
The problem.
it is a big problem. And I just,
It is a big problem.
yeah.
I think it was Brett Weinstein pointed out recently that the problem with that kind of policy making is that it doesn't use the conservative, the Sowell trade-off. Thomas Sowell says there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. You never solve anything. You just create a new series of problems and consequences. But Newsom, for example, every single one of his things are a solution to it. Oh, this will solve that. No, you're not solving things. You're putting forward what
Yeah.
was the pardon me, what was the I'm stumbling now. Fast food restaurant.
Yes.
Minimum wage, except for his friends
Right.
who own a restaurant, and they don't have to adhere to the law. Wait,
Right. And
what?
then he gets to go out to eat and he doesn't have to wear a mask. And then of course we saw in Minnesota where, oh, well, if you're rioting and protesting police action, you don't need to wear masks. You can be out after curfew. You can burn down half the city block or whatever. But if you're just sitting on your front porch, you get paintballed and told to go inside. This
That's right.
this two-tiered
Favored
notion,
groups.
that's a good way to put it, policy by virtue, where somebody decides who is good and who is bad. And what is always baffling to me is when I hear people say things like, people on the right they're so judgmental or they're so moralistic and whatever. And I'm like, have you heard the left lately? Like, who's telling me more often, like on a daily basis, that I'm a bad person, and not because of something I've done. This is what's amazing to me. Not because they can point to any action on my part that has hurt anybody, that has violated anyone's rights, or even that has been offensive, hurtful, like you're a jerk or whatever. But just opinions that I hold, like conclusions that I have come to after looking at evidence.
Right. Or things they think that you think.
Right. Assume. Lots of
Right.
assumption.
Right. Right.
Dude,
Well,
I've had people look at my hair. I'm not even exaggerating. I've had people look at my hair and say that because I have a side part, I'm white and have a side part and light hair, that for sure I must be a right-wing bigot.
Oh
I'm a
my
Karen. I'm
God.
a right-wing bigoted Karen because of my freaking hair.
Oh my
I'm like,
God.
I'm sorry, what? Should I dye it purple? Will that make you feel better?
God. That is
It's like
totally insane.
Insane. And this is it. Well, I knew you were one of the, and then conversely, I've had people on the more extreme right because I'm female. So like, just because I'm female, and if I express an opinion that, like, for example, when I took issue with the cat lady thing and I said, hey, this is not cool. You can say or the childless stuff. I hate when people go after childless people like they don't have stake in the future. What a load of crap that is. And I don't like attacking people by identity markers. That's if it's identitarianism from the
Right.
left, it is from the right too. I'm like, guys, don't do that. Don't become those people. And so when I do that, it's like, you're a lib turd. Should have known. You're female. You would have this
God.
opinion. And I'm like, oh my God, you're doing it. You're literally doing it right now.
Right.
Like, stop.
Right. Well,
And it coming and going.
Yeah. Well, Deb, I've got to leave. And
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. And thank you for the very interesting discussion to everyone. And I would have just relayed this to you in chat, but I've got this weird thing still on my screen, right? From Scatolino. I don't know if this person is sending me a request for this kind of thing. I can get them in touch with somebody in San Francisco who will do that. But you know what? It costs a hell of a lot of money. So,
I think you can block them. I blocked them, and that made it go away for me. I hope no one else can see it. But
I will definitely block them. So. Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry.
so yeah.
Thank you, Liberty Wolf, for being
here. Thank you all. Okay, take care.
All right.
Mhm.
So, okay, Jennifer, you have your hand raised. Ethan has his hand raised. Whoever wants to go, just dive in. If you guys have something to say. Hello? Bueller, can you hear me?
Not me. I tapped out.
Oh, okay. Are you there? Did you have something to say? Hello? Jennifer? Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Okay. All right. So your hand went down. Jennifer still has her hand up, but I don't know if she can hear me. She was having some sound issues before, so I didn't know if she could hear me. If anyone else would like to speak, and I have not already invited you to speak, feel free to send a request and you may speak. This is a chat, so it's not so much Deb's show. It's more like anybody who is either contemplating voting for Trump but is reluctant or is conflicted about it, or you could have always been wanting to vote for Trump but are getting flack from people about it for various reasons or whatever. Anything you want to say, because this is just an open forum here. Okay, so who would like to go next? Feel free. Jump in. I still see Jennifer's hand up. That's the funny thing. Faceless, did you want to say anything?
Just quickly, I'll say hi, Deb.
Hi.
I found you on YouTube, and you did an interview with some parents that had lost their children to this gender theory ideology, and when the state got involved and things, and it was actually amazing. The stories they had were, absolutely terrible, and it made me realize how impactful this issue is. So, and you've been a great voice in that area. So I just want to say thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and I appreciate it. It's I half the time don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of try to pull stuff together and present it as best I can, but I hope it has an impact and just raises awareness. I wish I could get more people to see these stories and listen to these stories. What I'm very pleased about is that particular show you referenced did get, I think it caught the attention of GenSpect as an example, and then GenSpect started getting more attention on them and some other organizations that have been fighting for this. And then, of course, our friend Pamela, who's in the listening right now, wrote a book, which we talked about in another interview about how parents can deal with this if they start to see this in their kids' schools. And I highly recommend that book. So what I really like about, what I've been able to do is to keep raising awareness that passes off to other people who are better at actually dealing with it, and helping people tactically. And that's what I set out to do. I just wanted to connect people with the right people. So if I can just surface something and talk about it, because the one thing I I do have, for whatever reason, I don't know when you call it cursed or blessed with this, and I'm not afraid to have these conversations, even with my real name. And even if people are going to hate me and, point fingers at me and not hire me and, and I'm going to remain unemployed forever. I don't care. It's probably, I'm sure my family members wish I cared more, but I don't care, because for me, I would rather my kids, just my kids, no one else can remember me, but look back someday and say, Mom tried. Like, she told the truth. We, for everything else we could say about her, she was crappy at marketing herself and she's shitty at earning a living, but she told the truth. She had integrity. Like, honestly, I know that sounds weird, but that's been my foremost goal in life. And it might have something to do with the fact that as a kid, I was surrounded by liars. I grew up in a home where people were constantly lying, and I was lied to. And then I had a lot of people in my early adulthood who lied to me. And I just told myself, I'm like, I will never, ever be that person who steals somebody else's peace of mind. It's just a form of aggression I cannot tolerate. So I won't do it. Certainly not consciously. I'm sure I've made mistakes and said things that were not accurate, and I try to come back and correct it, but I will never intentionally lie, except possibly like save a life, like, nope, she's not here. Like, I'd do that, but I'm not going to sit here and misrepresent something that is true. And so if that means I can connect people who aren't getting talked about enough, that's what I want to do.
You're the best.
Yeah, and it's amazing that the people feel that they can reach out and come to you as well, as a voice and someone that supports them.
Well, and sure. That was an honor, actually, because that was another thing that I set out to do. Was I wanted people to feel like, there are a lot of people out there who are grifting. Let's face it. There are a lot of people who are trying to make a name for themselves or trying to make money off of other people's pain, because there's a lot of pain going around right now. And that was something else. Again, having been a kid who grew up with some issues in my family and so forth, I know how difficult it is to trust people with your story, with, when you're going through something, because you will be judged. So it's not just a question of this is private information. It's also the fact that those parents, I'm sure there were people who maybe came across a story who judged them. In fact, I know for a fact there were people who judged them harshly and blamed them. And so to trust your story in the hands of somebody who, first of all, isn't going to do either of those two things, but is going to discourage it or frown upon it or come down on people who try to pull that nonsense, is hard. You don't want to be exploited. And
those people must be activists in one way or another.
Of course they are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You heard those people, and you let them speak. It wasn't an interview looking for sound bites or anything. You heard their whole story, and they spoke, honestly, and they took their time. They spoke about difficult things, and you can tell it's the truth, and you can hear their pain, and you can hear when they were confused and didn't know what to do, and then they told you what they said and how long this went on for. These people weren't out to get anyone. They were, what's happening to my daughter or son,
Exactly.
And for anyone to hear that and think it was, you're transphobic is ridiculous. I mean, they have to be an activist of some kind.
Well, there is definitely that. And then there are parents out there, and I think it happens with any kind of scary, whether it was anorexia once upon a time or something else, people who see something like that happen or some kind of social contagion take over somebody else's children, they want to believe it can't happen to them. And so they want to find reasons it's those people's fault. Like, they want to find a reason that it's not going to be them because they're not doing the thing wrong. And I understand it's a human thing to do. It's fairly natural to do, but I think we all have to fight that impulse. When I got divorced, when I was first separated from my ex-husband, there were friends of mine who were really eager to figure out, what I did wrong or what my ex did wrong. Like, they were trying so hard to exempt themselves. Like, this isn't going to happen to me. And it's like, well, you know your relationship. Like, I'm me and you're you. And I can't, I'm not going to help you out here with this. That's not my job. And it's the same with these parents who are going through this. They've gone through what they've gone through. And ideally, what we should all be doing is looking at it and saying, realistically, this can happen to anybody. Anything bad can happen to anybody. Anything we don't want to happen can happen to anybody. You're not protected from anything. And so, try to have a little compassion and listen and just look at your own life and say, am I doing the best job I can do? Not what did they do wrong? That means I'm going to be okay. Life doesn't work like that. Something else could go wrong. So I think there's a fair amount of that, especially with social contagions. People want to feel like, not my kid. I'm not doing that. They must have been, or what I heard from a lot of people was, well, typical liberal parents. Oh, the moms must be feminists, whatever. And I'm like, you'd like to think that, wouldn't you? That would make you feel better. But I'm here to tell you, well, you might see some correlations here and there. If you did a graph, there's no protection. There's no guarantee. And, better you should look at what's going on with your own children and develop a really good relationship with them. And that's your only real protection, not what kind of politics you have or don't have. It's what kind of relationship do you have with your child? So, but I appreciate your feedback so much. I really do. And, I'm glad that show is evergreen. I hope more people see it because there are people just like them going through it today. Pam could speak to it, I'm sure too. But anybody else, as far as the topic at hand of Trump and so forth and so on? Jennifer, you were going to say something.
do have to ask if anyone saw the young reporter trolling at the DNC, the comedian.
Yes, I saw that.
I mean,
Yes, Alex Stein.
no,
Was it
not
Alex
Alex Stein. Hold on, let me see if I can find it.
No, it was this like taller guy. He was-
And one of, he said, one of the things was democracy or abortion. And the poor girl was like, that's a hard one. I can't decide.
Oh, I saw that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
But it was so, I found it comical, but tax credits, child tax credits for dogs. Yes, Queen, let's do this. I was like, these people are out of touch right now.
Yeah, well, like I said before, it goes back to the whole, there is a lot of social currency to be had in simply saying that you're a Democrat. Now, when you couple that with the fact, because that's what all your teachers, I wouldn't say all, 90% of your teachers, your professors, if you're a college student, most of your same age friends, if you hang out on TikTok, that's the rabbit hole that you're getting sucked down into most of the time. If you consume any of the pop psychology stuff, the, sort of therapy talk junk that's out there, it tends to lead you towards, everything is oppressive that I don't like and I'm a victim, and who's going to validate that for you? Well, it is not likely to be Donald Trump and JD Vance, right? So and then you take into account that conventions are always a little nuts and they tend to attract, if you're not a delegate, literally, they tend to attract people who are on the extreme side of partisanship, which means they're probably a little nutty to begin with. They want to be in front of cameras. So I've tried to take a lot of that with a grain of salt, but the worldview of the average Democrat right now is really confused and contradictory. We believe that everyone should be seen and loved for who they are. Okay, this person was born male. No, accept that. It's like, or this person was born white. Well, not them, so they don't really love everyone for who they are. They don't really have empathy because empathy and force don't go together. You don't decide how someone should live or what someone should feel and then call yourself an empath. And so every single thing they claim to be or think is contradicted by their actions and by the policies that they support. And that's a tough thing to take when you're sitting back and watching it, because it's crazy making. Like if you talk about the psychological abuse and that sort of thing, it is crazy making to be in the company of, or, maybe under threat of control by people who look at you and say one thing, I love you. That's why I have to hurt you. It's like, if you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship, you know what I'm talking about. And right now, a lot of the people on that side of the fence are really a whole lot like that. That's probably why I recoil so much from them, because I have been in those kind of relationships where you get this smile and you get this, I'm just trying to make you a better person. I just want you to be a better person. I know best. Are you okay? This kind of thing. and then they turn around and do something aggressively nasty or literally aggressive. I'm going to take your money now because you have too much. You don't really need that job. You shouldn't be, in this role because you need to go do the work. You need to work on yourself, and you shouldn't be in a role where you help people because you got to go help yourself first. And this is how they talk. And to me, it's monstrous. But most people just look at it and go, they're so confused. They're so stupid. No, that's very dangerous, actually. I'm not willing to say they're stupid or confused. If they are, it doesn't matter. They're dangerous. That's dangerous. That's a very dangerous way to be, believing that you are good while you're hurting people. Because you'll justify just about anything. I mean, C.S. Lewis wrote about that. You'll justify absolute monstrous behavior and say that you're doing it for the greater good. And I see that happening. Now, obviously, there are some people on the very far right, or you might call them, I don't know what you want to call them at this point, what kind of label, but who think we need to, let's say Nick Fuentes type of people, the Groyper cast, we need to literally go back to segregation, and we need to ban gay marriage because families and whatever. That is obviously the same idea in reverse. I just don't think it quite has, they haven't taken over any of the institutions, right? The institutions have been captured by the other side of the horseshoe. So not to say it couldn't switch. I mean, socialism becomes fascism in a blink of an eye, but I just don't see Trump. I just don't see him supportive of that. Maybe I'm delusional. Anyone else have a thought? Anyone? Bueller? Running these things is hard, you guys, because you're like, get all these faces and you don't know if anyone is going to join in or they're just sitting there laughing. Anybody else have anything to add? Okay, show of thumbs. I did this in the first space I did earlier. Show of thumbs. Who right now is like solid on their, you don't have to. I was gonna say solid on their decision to vote for Trump. I'm just curious. No judgment. Okay, 2. I guess I'd add myself to that. I'm pretty solid. I'm reluctant, but I'm solid on it. Who is still like really on the fence and not sure what to do about it, but definitely considering it? Like it's one of the options. Okay. And now just how many people felt like RFK going over and endorsing Trump made a difference to them? Was something that swayed you more towards Trump? And I'm going to put myself in that category. Okay. All right. So that's how I felt too, which is so weird because so many of his policies I don't necessarily agree with because he's a Democrat, but what he said about food and drugs and stuff, that's very, very much aligned with my thinking.
If he had endorsed Kamala, would he have moved you over towards Kamala?
No. See, isn't that interesting? I'm glad you asked that. It makes me think. No. And I think it would have been more jarring because they've been attacking him. So the Democrat Party has been actively attacking him and suing him and trying to keep him off the ballot and censoring him and making it really difficult for him to speak even in his own campaign. So if he had done that, I would have been absolutely shocked. Like, is somebody threatening him with physical harm? Like, that would have shocked me. And then because I'm so averse to the whole power grab that they seem intent on executing, I would then also wonder if they'd gotten him. Like I said, if he'd done that, I would have thought he's under threat of like death. I couldn't swear it. There's no way I could swear what they'd done to him with him doing that. Had he done nothing and he just withdrawn and said, I can't endorse Trump, it certainly would not have swayed me towards Trump for sure. It would have had a neutral, like a net zero effect. I would still be leaning more towards Trump than I was prior to the DNC though. So you see, this has been like an evolution in my thinking, where the more I heard from her.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Hold on a second. There's some Californian, half Chinese, half American lady running with RFK, and I saw RFK say I endorse Trump, and then about an hour later, I saw this lady who is, I mean, I guess number 2 in RFK's campaign, say we would endorse Trump if, and then she listed a bunch of things she wanted him to do as far as acknowledging failures in Warp Speed. But that video was like, I don't really know the timeline of it, but that video was older than RFK saying, "Oh, we endorse Trump," but not by very much.
Well, did you listen
So
to his speech? Did you hear his speech? Because
no, I didn't.
RFK's in his speech, he indicated that they still have some policy differences. However, they are willing to talk about them, and they agree about some very fundamental things, and they want to work together on the places where they agree. And he has told RFK that he's willing to hear his arguments in the areas where they disagree. The areas where they agree are ending the forever wars, what they call the forever wars, reducing the size and scope of the military-industrial complex, reforming FDC, HHS, NIH, and all that whole mess, getting the corruption out of these agencies to end the chronic disease epidemic in our country and restore trust to these institutions as protectors of our rights rather than just power brokers for pharmaceutical companies and things like that, and helping them cover up and make money. And he also said that they want to tackle corruption and lies insofar as election law, just straight up, and censorship and freedom of speech and things where the Democrats are really looking to do more to censor people, especially people trying to run for office. And all of those things, I think, would be important to all Americans, irrespective of their party. So that was important to me. Now, I don't know an economic policy where they align. I don't know. But these things are pretty big. And, so that's kind of what swayed me there. As far as on why I was leaning more towards Trump than I had been after watching Kamala speak at the DNC, not just Kamala, but all the other people, it just really came down to these people really want power. These people really do not respect individuals, and they do not respect the average American. They are willing to mock us. They are willing to judge us. They are willing to cast us as evil, and they think nothing of pitting, rich against poor, white against black, gay against straight. Like, there was so much divide for all their joy. There was so much divisive language and anger. And everyone's like, it's such an upbeat kind of thing. And I'm like, all I'm hearing is venom. And I don't get that from Trump. And I just said, no, I don't, you people scare me. And then when I factored in the economic policies that she was floating, I thought if there's even a 50% chance that she would enact any of these, I'm out. Like, not that I ever vote for her, but I need to vote against her. I need to do something. And that would obviously be a Trump vote. So that's kind of where I was when I heard RFK speech. And then after I heard him speak, I was like, all right, I'm pretty much there. So, and then I thought I'd have this today because I voiced that. And I got lectured and yelled at by some people very close to me. It doesn't change my mind, but it just made me realize, I want to talk to some other people, see if they're going through this. Pamela has her hand raised. Hello.
Hey, I just wanted to say hi.
Hi.
I've been listening. I was actually shopping for an American flag dress to go to my next Trump rally while you guys were talking.
How funny.
So I thought you wanted to hear maybe my point of view.
Yes,
you know
please.
how I feel about the trans thing and all that. I'm probably, a lot of you in this group, especially who are libertarians, would think I'm an extremist at this point. I never was before, but once you start to learn what it really is, and you start to become more extreme on those topics. But that's not the only issue at play here. So yeah, Trump was not my first choice. I think probably similar to you, especially because of the COVID stuff.
Yes.
I still don't forgive him for Operation Warp Speed. I don't forgive him for promoting the whole vaccine and pushing it onto the governors. He humiliated Ron DeSantis for not pushing the vaccine further for the lockdowns. He promoted lockdowns. I mean, there's so many things, but we just have to be real here. Our choice is Trump, who has these flaws, and I'm sure people have lots of other hangups on Trump aside from the media lies, but real hangups, or communism, right? I mean, we have to save our country. And Kamala represents Marxism and communism. And I think people need to like put their emotions aside and recognize that we as Americans do not want communism. That's in nobody's best interest. And the people who are fooled by this are the ones who are fooled by this, joy campaign, which is absolutely ludicrous. And most people probably don't know this. I'm from California. I'm from the Bay Area of California, which is where Kamala is from. Nobody likes her there, even the Democrats. Nobody likes her until, she got this little, media campaign. So it's all fake. It's all smoke and mirrors. She's awful. She bailed out the BLM rioters. She locked up people just for smoking marijuana. She kept people in jail that didn't deserve to be kept there. And she's just awful. We all know her her personal history. But she has no integrity, zero. And and also, I don't understand why Trump isn't talking about this. Just the fact that she's been hiding the fact that Joe Biden has been compromised all of this time.
Well, that's a big issue for me too. And I mean, I really think because the press is so friendly, they don't even ask her any hard questions.
And zero questions, not even
zero
hard,
questions. It's like,
questions.
how do you feel? How do you feel? Congratulations. How do you feel? And I'm like, are you serious? This is journalism. How do you feel? And congratulations.
Yeah.
And I am flabbergasted that this is the current vice president of the United States, who was telling us not even a month ago that Joe is great and perfectly competent and everything is great. And then he's out. And he's like, oh, soul searching, blah, blah, blah. And he's out. And then we're all wondering, like, okay, so he was fine. And then now he's not fine. And then how do you just assume the position? There was no election. There was no voting. Is he running the country right now? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, what the hell is happening?
It's just not getting enough attention. I don't know that Trump can be the person asking, though. I almost feel like that's a Vance thing.
Yeah, somebody, even, I don't know, commercials. Like, I feel like that should be the thing. I don't understand how that's not acknowledged. What the hell is going on with Biden? What happened to him? We now know he did have that medical emergency in Nevada a month and a half ago, or whenever that was. Right. Where was he when he disappeared? Where was he when he wrote that weird letter on a Sunday? It's so much weirdness. So I just think we need to pull back and let go of our hangups about whatever negative feelings we feel towards Trump, because like you said very well earlier, he is about liberty. Even if he makes bad decisions, even if he's kind of a dick and he has so much ego, at the same time, he is for freedom and he is for American values, and the alternative is just so much worse. And I just think people need to just acknowledge that.
Right. Exactly. And I don't even want to get into I hope that Trump stays away from anything to do with her personal life. Obviously, he has no leg to stand on there. And I hope he hope he stays away from even like race issues and all of that. Like stay away from her kid or stepdaughter, stay away from Waltz's son, stay away from like all of this stuff.
There's so much to attack that's of substance.
There's so much of substance. It does not need to be. And this is where I really think this election is either won or lost on how he conducts himself in these debates. And every time he gets in front of a microphone, if he can, from now until, remember the mail-in ballots go out in a couple of weeks, if he can just turn this around to be about the promise of America, the what Freedom Unleashed gives us economically, what the American people are capable of when we don't have the government's boot on our neck, how we can turn inflation around when we stop printing money, when we stop funding wars, when we stop funding other countries and all this other stuff. I think the people will rally, because Americans just like during the Reagan years, I think people are just looking for somebody to say, you guys got this, and I'm going to get these people out of your way. I'm not going to come in and make it all better. I'm not your daddy. I'm not your mommy. I'm not going to put a new law here and a new law there. I'm not going to steal from your neighbor to give you some more stuff. They did that through COVID. Is anybody better off? Here's your stimulus payment. Here's your other payment. Here, you don't have to pay rent for 2 years. You don't have to pay your tuition. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Is everybody better off for all the stuff they didn't have to pay for? No. Now they want to go rent an apartment. Okay, I'm going to need like 6 months security deposit and the rent is twice as high. Because people don't want to rent because they've been told by the government they can't charge rent for 2 years. And in some cases, they literally lost their property. Other people are having, new taxes put on them out of the blue. And I think if he steps up to the plate and says, we had a situation with COVID, nobody knew what it was really about. We tried some things. It didn't really serve us well in the last analysis, but we're not going to do that again. We've learned from our mistakes and we are done printing money and we are done paying people not to work. And we are done getting in your way, in the way of producers, in the way of job creators and small business and farmers and all of the forgotten people, the people who were basically treated like they were non-essential, inconsequential because they weren't, the very bottom rung of society. They were in the middle. And we in the middle, I think, have been forgotten. So if he can say that message in a very positive way, I think he runs away with it. That's my take. But they're not asking me. It's not like they're coming to me and going, hey, Deb, what's your campaign advice? Because that's what it would be. She has no story to tell there. She has no story. We're going to give people $25,000 to buy a home. Meanwhile, there are people who literally bought a house like yesterday who didn't get that. And what are you telling them? Right? What are you telling homeowners now where they're like, oh, okay, well, so I guess I got to jack up the price $25,000. What are you telling people who paid their own? What about students who are getting loans paid off and then students who didn't get their loans paid off? So he should also flip that around.
I wish he was better at explaining why his policies work. I wish, in general, Republicans were better at getting their message out. I was a lifelong Democrat for a long time because I was ignorant, because, partly the media is so, lopsided, but also the Republicans are not good at spreading their message. Instead they attack the JD Vance's son, or they talk about the stepdaughter's, haircut or tattoos. And then the plot gets lost and it's stupid when it's like, if you could all just talk about why Kamala's plan is going to destroy our country, that would be much more productive. And I wish they would get those messages out, because people just don't know. They don't understand. I can't, it's hard for me to get that message to my own family. They don't listen because, like you said earlier, they're very emotionally driven and virtue signal driven. And the Republicans are just too stubborn and too snobby. And they also don't, the Democrats also, they get it that people are dumb and that they don't understand economics. And conservatives assume people are too smart. They need to actually dumb down their campaigns a little bit so people get it.
Emotional appeals work. Let's face it. I don't love appeal to emotion, but they work. Zulu, you had something to say?
Hey, how's everybody going? How's everybody doing this afternoon?
Good, thanks.
Thanks for having a great space.
Thank you.
I've been kind of debating this, and I've been really wrestling with this feeling, and I think I keep going to be solidly in the camp of not being able to vote for either candidate, and I know that drives me crazy, and I'm really struggling with this, and it's difficult for me ethically. Creating an argument to vote for either one is impossible, and I'm really struggling with that. I wonder if anybody else is.
I was where you are, like, about 3-4 days ago. Really not that long ago. I was in a place where I was just so horrified what I was hearing coming out of the DNC. And at the same time, like, I cannot come up with a good argument to vote for Trump. And then I thought, okay, I'll vote for Chase. I'll vote for Chase Oliver. And then because I thought, well, I can vote Libertarian. I wasn't really that steeped in RFK's, ideas, and I'm not a Democrat. So I thought, okay. But then I did some more work researching Chase's positions on the trans stuff and gender theory. And I was like, I can't support that either. He went against the Georgia bill. He went against some other bills that I support. And I'm like, okay, I can't do that. So I just thought, what am I going to do? I guess I'm not going to vote. It sucked. And then I heard RFK speak, and I thought to myself, as I was telling people earlier, that, maybe there's hope here. But, Ethan made some points earlier, I think before you came, Zulu, that actually were very helpful. I don't know if Ethan is still listening, but if you wanted to voice those, that helped me a lot as well, feel a little better about voting for Trump. Not trying to talk you into it, just saying if you're feeling really conflicted and struggling. I'm sorry, Faceless, did you want to say something?
I want to ask Zulu, give us a pros and cons of, what's good about Trump, what's bad about Trump versus what's good about Kamala and bad about Kamala. I want to hear what you're conflicted about, which issues or, what concerns and what positives you have on either side.
Oh, that's a great question. All right, let me see if I can do a decent job. I'll start with pros about Trump, right? I think he has a decent family, and I think that's important. I think it would be pro business. I think pro freedom, pro free speech. I'm a business owner, and obviously the work that I do deals with unresolved trauma. So people that clamp down on speech is extraordinarily dangerous, because in order to heal, you have to be able to talk about really difficult subjects. So I think on that front would be good. I think policy-wise, there has been some interesting policy. Some of his foreign policies were pretty interesting. On the economy side, it was pretty interesting. That's strong. Negatives. I think as a leader, he's a poor leader. I'm a CEO of a company, and at the end of the day, the buck always stops with me. And the not assumption of responsibility was really bothersome. That is like, oh, it's not my fault, it's so-and-so's fault, and he would keep kind of blaming people on it. So on the leadership side, and just the disaster of his personal, all the attention that took was catastrophic. Like, I didn't like that. It was very difficult for me to square those things of like how much attention. And it's like the president needs to be relatively vanilla, and you just move forward and don't mess up the country kind of situation. That's my stance. So those pros and cons, and there's a lot more to it, but I won't bore everybody with my kind of opinions on both sides. And then on Kamala Harris's side, on the pros, I think, from what I understand, she was relatively tough on crime in California. I'm not sure what that is, but I did see that she made some terrible decisions on incarcerating African Americans for a long period of time for minor drug offenses, which is insane. And then she, I think, hid, evidence or obfuscated evidence for keeping people incarcerated for long periods of time. And I'm really concerned about the trans issue. This amplification of unresolved trauma is extraordinarily dangerous. There's this victim perpetrator dynamic that's really concerning. So I can't really think a lot of pros on her side. I'm hoping that I want, my goal is to have sane Democrats and sane Republicans argue. I think that's where the tension and the power of this country comes from, is that, you have progressives that move the ball forward, and you have conservatives that make sure that the trains are running on time. And I want, middle people to be struggling with those ideas, right? Like, center left and center right arguing about principles and move the country forward. That's kind of my point. But, on through this exercise Faceless, what you said is like, I don't really have any pros for Kamala Harris. I do have some pros for Trump, but I just like on the leadership and accountability and pettiness side, especially the fact that I know people that have dealt with him and before his presidency, before he was famous, and he's just like from a personal ethics perspective is just not somebody that I look up to. So I'm really struggling, man. I hate being in this position. This sucks. It just drives me crazy.
My dad, I'm from New York City, and my dad had dealings, on both sides of the table with him. My dad was a litigator, and he was, when he was running the very first time in 2016, he was beside himself. Like, how can the Republicans have picked this person? And I didn't vote for him in 2016. I voted for the Libertarian candidate for Johnson. But then he won. And I told people earlier, like, I gave him a chance. I said, all right, well, let's see what he's going to do. And of course, because I expected terrible things, I was, pleasantly surprised. Like, this isn't so bad. And the tariffs were terrible, but the tariff stuff that he wanted to do. But as far as which he still wants to do, but as far as some of his other things, it was like, okay, well, tax cuts good, but he didn't cut spending. That was a problem. And he spent a lot of money and didn't like that. So it was a mixed bag, but it wasn't all bad. So because I expected nothing, I was like pleasantly surprised. Then what I didn't like, similar to you, was I didn't like how much attention was on him and all of this. He left so many people in place who were so obviously allied against him that I thought that was terrible management, to your point. Who does that? Like, these people hate your guts and they have it in for you. You get rid of them. Like, you don't leave them in place. You don't it's not conciliatory. It's not reaching across the aisle. It's just stupid. So that struck me as pretty dumb. And of course that we saw what happened. And it took up a lot of time and money and attention when we really needed somebody with their eye on the ball. So I had my issues with that. Coming into this, this time I was like, I wasn't never Trump. Like, I had TDS, but I just said, I voted for him in 2020. He lost. And then the whole way that he handled the loss, not January 6th. I think that a lot was made out of that didn't deserve what it got. But more the after that, the legal stuff and everything. And the whole time, well before the election, I was like, dude, now is the time you take legal action. What are you doing? What are you doing? Like, do something. And he didn't do anything. And he waits till after it's over. So of course it looks like sore loser. Right. And I thought that is just bad. Like, I'm not voting for him again. And that's where I've been, was just kind of like, forget it. I'll vote libertarian, et cetera. And then I guess I thought he was running against Biden. Not that I wanted Biden to be president again, but I had this kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, like resigned apathy, like whatever, it's going to be what's going to be. Let's just see if we can get the libertarian candidate up to 5% nationwide and, send a message. It never dawned on me they would actually perpetrate this little coup. I really need to revise my shock levels, to be different than they are, because I'm way too easily shocked now, and I shouldn't be. And then once they just kind of replaced Biden after lying and lying and lying, and the media just went along with it, I was like, we're living in some weird new version of the Soviet Union, because I studied the Soviet Union back when I was in college. I studied their politics. And these things are functioning very similarly to the way they work there. And I saw it and I said, this is really kind of frightening, this whole machine thing. And then when she stepped in front of the microphone, and so did all those other people, and started talking about, we believe this and we believe that, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and billionaires, millionaires, we're going to take their money and they have too much. And then hearing her float these policies, but not commit to anything on paper. And I felt like we were in a slow rolling revolution. Like this, it's not coming, it's here. And we maybe just don't see it because they're doing such a great job of concealing it and disguising it and pretending it's not really happening. But I don't know that it's not already too late to, save the republic. But I guess I'm looking at it now as I feel like if I don't do everything I possibly can to try to stop that, or at least throw sand in the gears, then how am I going to face my kids? Like, will I regret it? Will I look back and regret it and say, oh, you and your principals, you wanted to make a point. To whom? To whom? The people online with you in the grocery line to get, your daily ration? Like, what is your point now? And I started feeling like it was a little bit of a luxury belief that not voting wouldn't matter, and that I could just, stand on principle. I can stand on principle on all my local and state elections with ease. I don't know about this one. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I feel like I need to. And then when he took the strategic move to bring RFK on board or get his endorsement, yes, it's strategy, but that's mature. That he's matured since last time. For those two to reconcile enough to shake hands and stand on the same stage, that's a little bit of growth for him, which shocked me. And then the other thing was, it's smart, it's a smart deal, if you will. And on top of that, if he really is true to his word, which is a crapshoot, but let's say he is, that he cares about dealing with disease and the food supply and so forth, insofar as cracking down on corruption and fraud, I don't want coercive laws like forcing people to eat this or not eat that, but I definitely want the corruption, the fraud, the lies, the favoritism, the rent seeking, all of these kind of things that I absolutely hate, that I do believe are going on in these federal agencies. I do want that dealt with, and I think RFK gets it on that front. And so that's why I think an alliance there gave me some hope that maybe a couple issues that really matter a lot to me might get more attention than they otherwise would have, and they won't get any attention on the Kamala side, like zero, because those are all her big donors. Those are the people that run the machine. And so I don't have this whole drain the swamp idea anymore. That's just not happening. But if we can throw sand in the gears and uncover some, at least just tell the American people the truth. If he did nothing else but won and got in there and allowed RFK to stand up in the bully pulpit or go in front of Congress and testify and say, I've uncovered this fraud and this waste and this, graft and this, that, and the other, and the FDA and the NIH and the CDC, and therefore our food supply is unsafe because they're using these agencies as money laundering schemes and power broker, departments. The American people would hear something, wouldn't they? I mean, that would expose it, and it really needs to be exposed. The journalists will still try to say they're crazy, cuckoo, blah, 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 but it will still, we have a right, once it's being testified in front of Congress, they cannot hide it the way they're hiding it now. They've done such a great job of censoring him and all the other doctors and all the other scientists that you talk to the average person in the street, do you know what the negative side effects of this or that are? Do you think this is safe or that is safe? And the average person is, what are you talking about? This is a problem? Why I shouldn't feed this to my kids? They literally don't know. You can't make informed decisions for yourself, like as we libertarians would like us to do, if you don't know. If somebody's willfully hiding the information from you, then how are you making your decisions? It's not your choice then. It's someone else's choice. Hey, it's food. Perfectly fine. Eat it. Wait, it's microplastics. Why am I eating microplastics? I don't want to eat microplastics. They should probably tell us. So that's kind of where I came down on it. If we just get more attention on these issues and on what's causing our kids to be so sick, that will be a good thing. But I don't have high hopes, but it's higher than it was. Anyway, anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, could I respond to that real quick? Oh,
please.
Yes. Oh,
yeah. I keep getting this feeling that, and not feeling, and I think it's more of there's a lot of evidence towards this, is that we're currently being leveraged for the extremes to destroy in some capacity the country, right, or greatly weaken it. And Yuri Bezmenov's, strategy is a former KGB agent that came, defected to the United States, and talks about these 4 phases or 3 phases that is how you destabilize a powerful country like the United States. And I'm originally from Venezuela, and I saw this happen in Venezuela. Right, first they took over the educational institutions, and then the educational institutions started to seep into common life, right? And then the governmental institutions and set up this dynamic of this victim perpetrator, right? And that's what I think the danger of Marxism really is. Is this victim perpetrator narrative, right? It's like the us versus them, the haves versus the have-nots. And if we start dividing, and this happens on both left and right? Both extreme fascism comes from this, and also communism or socialism comes from the same base formula or the base ingredients of this. And I think what happens is it ends up coming from unresolved trauma in social systems, and cultural and social systems. And if enough people feel victimized, that victimization can be leveraged to create conflict. And I think that, I can't help but feel that there's external adversaries against the United States that understand this dynamic, that are actively leveraging this, right? And because we've gained so much mental real estate from the advancement of technology, that now the thing that's coming up, right, that we're no longer trying to survive, right? In the 1920s and during the Great Depression, everybody was trying to survive. Then there was the baby boomers, like everybody was very prosperous, so everybody was industry, everybody was very busy building things, right? And now that the workload has decreased so much, we've left this mental real estate open to have a fertile ground for manipulation and leveraging, right? And so the only way that I know to get to outgrow being manipulated, right, or being triggered is to deal with your own internal demons and your own unresolved trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I found is the more I work on my shit, the less susceptible I am to mental mind viruses, right? It's the inoculation of the soul in some capacity that I can no longer be manipulated. I can start seeing the forest for the trees. I'm like, these are patterns that are happening over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just been through this deep work that I've done to be able to say that. So like, how do we educate people to be like, work on your shit so you're no longer manipulated? If you're left or right or up or down or pink or polka dot or whatever you are, don't have these extremist views where you see your opponent as the other,
Mm-hmm.
therefore creating a ground where you could dehumanize them and then justifies horrific acts against them. So with that,
Yeah.
I'll land my plane.
No, I mean, I think you're right about that. Lady Lazarus, did you want to add to that or say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this before. I think what's laid the groundwork for us to be so divided like this is not just social media, which is full of echo chambers, but it's more like the education system has kind of set us up to be this way. Like it's not a bug of the system that all of these things get, like, woke stuff gets put into the schools and then we're fighting about that. Like you and I have talked about, the system was set up, like with this Prussian model, it's set up to get people to not think. So if you're concerned about the fact that people don't have critical thinking skills, which I know that's like, maybe it's not critical thinking skills, maybe it's active thinking skills, maybe it's, you know, teaching your children to have a bullshit detector, which is what I do with mine. But like, if we're concerned about people being able to detect this and not to be divided into tribalism, there's only a couple answers to get us out of that. And like Deb and I talk about all the time about education being the key to all of that. And like, you know, it's really hard for people to think outside of those norms when it comes to politics, because we're all kind of being herded that direction because we're set up to do what we're told in school. And unless you've had a different like rearing, like unless your parents have raised you to have the ability to sort through what people are telling you to believe and what you see online, you're not going to be able to do that. You're just going to go with the tribalism, you know, because that's what we're going to revert back to no matter what. This experiment we're in America is an experiment. It's new.
True. That's true. And
it has to be protected.
It is normal for people to revert. It's a good word to say, revert or regress. What I keep coming up against are there two fundamentally different ways of looking at what your role is in the world, like on the planet. One of them is, my goal is to be good, not to be a good person, but to be good. And there is a slight difference. And then there's the view of, my goal is to pursue what is true. All right. So that would be a good person. And there is a difference between, you know, to be good is evaluated by other people. That's other people are telling you, you know, pat on the head, good job, you did good, we approve. And being a good person is more about at least this is Deb's definition, is not some like dictionary definition. This is how I look at it, is you set up your own sense of self and what virtues you want to live by or uphold, and then you live with that. That's how you choose to live. And it, you know, might upset people, it might offend people, somebody might feel this way or that way about it, but that's not really how you evaluate whether you are a good person. You are evaluating it based on, am I pursuing truth? Am I telling the truth? Am I living in truth? Am I, you know, as Zulu said, am I, you know, dealing with my own shit and owning my own shit, or am I projecting it on other people? Like, am I a self-contained, personally responsible individual in my own right? And answer yes or no. Now, you could live your whole life not doing anything for anyone else and be a good person, I think. Now, some people disagree with that and say, no, you have to do for others. Okay, that's your personal belief. I don't happen to think that. I think if you walk this earth and were just offended, you know, like not offended, but like hurt nobody, made your own living, built your own life and didn't take from anybody else or hurt anybody, you could be a good person. Okay. But you could do all kinds of do-goodery shit and be actually a bad person while walking around going, I'm good, I am good, I am good. And I think right now, what I see that's embodied in our education system is teaching children that the number one most important thing to be is good in the eyes of others. And if you can't be good in the eyes of others just because you automatically agree with everything, then you have to be a certain kind of victim. So you automatically have virtue if you are, quote unquote, marginalized, if you have the right identities, if you are perceived to be a victim by other people who need your existence. Some would call this like codependent, narcissist, kind of relate, whatever. They need you to be needy so they can be good. And this is a weird, dysfunctional, dependent on others way of living in the world. Whereas my way is like, no, I'm not dependent on anybody else. I define what is being a good person, and then I will evaluate myself. And if I fail, then I correct myself. But if 100 people lined up and say, we don't think you're good, and I look at what I've done and I'm like, disagree, I don't care. But we're teaching our kids they should care. They should care deeply. That should be their number one driver in life is, what are your emotions? Do other people feel the same emotions you? How is your wellness today? Are you being mindful of others? What have you done for others? Do you matter to others? And I'm being explicit. I did a whole show about it a couple weeks ago where I showed a lesson plan they had where they're teaching autistic children to evaluate their quote unquote mattering. And mattering is how other people see you, whether you matter to others. And I'm like, this is sick. This is exploitative. This is a way of using people's, desire. All children, I think, desire to be approved of because it's a safety thing. It's a survival skill. If somebody doesn't approve of you, they might starve you to death or kill you. You're small and dependent. So they're exploiting this natural need on the part of a vulnerable person to want to be perceived as good and worthy of care. And then they're teaching them that's the number one most important thing to have for your whole entire life. You're never going to be self-efficacious. So how do you become a good person? Well, I got to look to others to tell me. So I see it sort of fundamentally in those two ways. And that is why I think people will look at those who are quote unquote on the right or not leftist or whatever and say, you guys are so mean. Oh, you're so cruel. You're so this, you're so, you mean I'm just honest? You mean I just stick up for myself? You mean I take care of myself and I'm not going to devote my life to wondering how I can sacrifice myself to you? No, that's not mean. You're mean. That's not empathetic to tell me that my life belongs to you and a whole bunch of other strangers. That's actually very abusive. So we've turned things inside out where good is basically abuse and, being truthful and being a good person is, being seen as mean. And that's what we're teaching our kids. And that's how we get to this place where saying, I would like to keep my own property, please. And I would like to run my own affairs and be left alone. And I don't hurt anybody, just leave me be, is mean and selfish and cruel. And we can't allow that. How dare you? And we have a whole generation of people growing up and thinking that's normal and that they're the good ones.
Deb, I want to cut in and say that was amazing. I haven't heard it explained like that before. I mean, I'm not exactly sure if you just described Marxism without saying Marxism and what the differences are, but it was so nice to hear it on a practical level, and especially from the listener, the student, hearing it, and for people that aren't familiar with the Marxist takeover that's going on. Yeah, amazing. Actually, round of applause.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get on these little tears and I don't know if I'm boring everybody, but obviously I spend a ton of time thinking about this because I'm immersing myself in the curriculum and what they are doing in the schools. I literally subscribe to the AFT's Share My Lesson website where the American Federation of Teachers, a union, is sharing lesson plans for free with teachers that get used. And there are lots of other free sources of curriculum. So parents have absolutely no idea which teachers are using it or not using it. We can safely assume a fair number are, because otherwise, why would they keep pumping this stuff out? We know entire organizations exist for the sole purpose of pumping out free curriculum. There's Learning for Justice. There's there's a movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter in schools. There's so many, and it's all free. It's all absolutely free. And the teachers can just download it, use it in the classroom. And when you look at some of the stuff and you see the messages, it is one part cult, one part emotional abuse. And cults are emotionally abusive, but you cannot believe this is happening to children, never mind children in America. And, because I can only prove it when I get whistleblowers telling me this stuff. And then I'll show people, I'll say, here's this curriculum. And well, that's just on a website. Well, why is it there, do you think? Who's spending money on this and creating it if it's not getting used? Why would they put the millions upon millions of dollars into creating all these resources? Why would you see teachers creating whole databases that link to these resources if they weren't being used in the classroom? It's not that far a stretch for me to assume they're getting used. And you just aren't seeing it because they have one-to-one devices in the classroom that don't come home. They print things out, hand them out in class, and collect the work. They don't let it go home. They're very careful and they're very clever. And when you see people stand up at the DNC, as one woman did, and said she's a teacher and all her children are teachers, and they went into teaching because of social justice, because it is the best way to be a social justice, advocate. And I'm telling you, I was in grad school in 1989. They said that to us. Teaching is a political act. So this is where it's come from. And we now have, so 1989, you know how long ago that was. The kids I taught in my first grade class that I taught are now parents. They're parents. Now, I didn't teach them this garbage. I left teaching because they were pushing me to teach this garbage. So I know that after I left, that's what was happening. And they're growing up, and a certain percentage of them, you can safely assume, and adopted these ideas as truth, because what else did they know? They didn't get any competing ideas unless they got them at home. And I'm sorry to say, I don't like to dog on parents. I really don't, because parents are busy trying to earn a living. They weren't aware. They thought the schools were like the schools when they went to school, whatever. But the fact remains that even the parents who are good and involved, and I'm on the PTA and I care, and are you getting your homework done and so forth, they were not making sure that they passed their worldview to their children. It's not like they sat around the dinner table and said, let's discuss the views of our founders and make sure you're learning those. And to the extent they ever caught wind of like something amiss going on in high school, let's say, by then family dinner was over, kids out the door, kids doing their thing. Kid was like, Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not the teacher. You can't start at the first sign of, I have a liberal activist is sitting at my dinner table. You start when they're at like 3. And you keep going consistently a little bit, all the time. These are our views. These are our values, which is probably why your sort of more conservative, more religious kids or children in those families are a little bit more solid and grounded in some of these in alternative views anyway, than what's going on in the school, because they were presented on a daily or weekly basis with something else, when most parents, they're just like, school's doing it, right? I mean, they're passing on all of the stuff about America, of how to be a good citizen and what it means to be an American. They're doing that, right? And they were told, we're doing that. We're taking care of it. We got it all covered. You go to work. So, it's, in retrospect, they should have paid more attention, but I can be compassionate and forgive them that they didn't, because they were assured that this was getting done. All the names of all the classes and all the subjects made it sound like it. Why wouldn't you? We're doing American history and social studies. We're reading To Kill a Mockingbird. So parents thought, okay, great. We're reading it. They're reading the same books I read. What they didn't know is that the teacher was saying, well, let's look at Atticus Finch through the lens of how he's a white savior. Now we're going to discuss how, Animal Farm is not really about communism. It's really about this other thing and blah, 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 blah. Or we're just not going to read it at all. We're not going to read it all. And we're going to instead read Beloved, and you can read a rape scene. And then we're going to talk about, how white people rape black people or whatever. I mean, we just woke up during COVID. I think a lot of people saw it coming on the screens in their homes and went, oh, you said what to my child?
Meanwhile, those of us that have been awake to this for like a long time, not to use that word, was like, okay, I'm so glad that you're all seeing this now. Where
Yeah,
have
that
you
was
been when
me.
I've been trying to tell you this?
That was me. I was cast out of so many meetings. We're going back to like 2015, and that's already years after I had started like volunteering at my kids' schools and like calling things out, you know, to my ex-husband, to different people, and saying, you know, this is going on. You're a lunatic. You do realize you sound like a crazy person. Don't say that in front of anyone that I know, because I don't want to be associated with you. I mean, these are the kind of things that I heard. I still have a recording of a meeting I went to with the chairman of the board of the charter school that I moved my kids to, that they were in because their dad insisted they go to school and not be homeschooled anymore. And so I found a charter school. I had hoped and prayed that it was better than the regular public school. It was a lot of great dog and pony show, but then it very quickly revealed itself to be even more left wing than the regular public school. And I went and tried to confront the chairman of the board and the head of school about some very racist things that were going on there. And this was in early 2017. So Trump had been elected and so on. And I still have the recording of it. It was astounding. It was absolutely astounding. They sat there and told me affinity groups were good. Racial affinity groups were not racist. They were good for the kids. That I clearly didn't understand that because I was white. That if I had a problem with it, maybe my child should not be at the school. You know, if I needed my bigoted views, you know, basically like validated or whatever, that I just needed to understand. They didn't come right out and say, you need to check your privilege or you need to understand your blah, blah, blah. But it was like, you need to understand. I said, you do realize I'm a teacher. I was a teacher. It's not, you're not talking to somebody who's not been in the classroom, and I've been volunteering in the classroom for the last 2 years at your school. I've seen this with my own 2 eyes, how the kids are treating each other and what's going on. And I kept getting this, you know, you don't really understand, you're imagining things, gaslighting that was going on. And I walked out of there wanting to pull my hair out like in chunks. They actually threatened me with a lawsuit because I said I was going to the press about an event. They had allowed one of the teachers to take a segregated school trip to Washington, D.C. for a science event for women in science. And it wasn't segregated by gender. It was segregated by race. So the event was already for girls in science and STEM and whatever. And then they only picked girls of color. So my daughter wanted to go and she was told, you can't. You cannot go. And then they went and posted to the Instagram account for the teacher who was given a week off to do this. They were posting, you know, we don't like Trump. We don't like Trump. They were dancing in the metro, and all the kids had Obama shirts on as if he could even be president. And of course, everyone saw it. It was like getting shared around all the parents because a lot of the parents at the school were proud. Isn't this wonderful? Isn't it great? And that was what I was there to complain about. I said, this is outrageous. This teacher needs to be disciplined. And my daughter was segregated out of attending a trip. And they had every excuse under the sun. Well, the parents paid for it themselves. I said, who paid the teacher? Presumably she took time off, paid. Well, we had a sub. No, you're not hearing me. This is not okay.
Can I interrupt for a second? I
Yeah.
apologize.
No.
It's Lady Lazarus speaking now.
That was me talking
Was it?
before.
I think it was awesome. Everything you're saying is great. I just want to try to put it in the context of the topic of the chat. I'm not saying you're off topic.
No, I am off topic. No, please bring us back.
That was my fault. Sorry.
Bring us back.
No,
you're absolutely right.
But you're not really, because it's bizarre that people, and I've heard it in this chat, that people say, you know, oh, it's a vote for communism with Kamala or a vote for not communism with Trump, right? And it's a very fair point. But this didn't start with Kamala. This has been going on in our schools for ages, and everything you're describing are, you know, you have to speak quickly and without, you know, going into detail in these spaces. But they've turned into indoctrination camps. Deb did a great job of explaining the whole social side of it, how they're manipulating children with the social parts rather than the truth. And you're adding to that with how it's enforced, and you've got these teachers and schools forcing it. I mean, they've embedded these people, you know?
Yeah, it's in the
Um,
institutions, all the major, and that's what
it's
Yuri Bezmenov said. Yuri Bezmenov said that it was a demoralization project initiated by the KGB. Now, obviously, you could go back farther than that. He's saying there was an intentional program. I could take you back to the founding of the school, the public schools from the start with adopting the Prussian model, Dewey, Horace Mann, et cetera. You can even find the writings of what was that guy's name? Hitler
Well,
said it was.
goes back to Martin Luther, actually.
Well, yeah, it goes so far back, and the problem that we have now is this is what we have. This is the system we have, and when we look at electing people to high federal office, what I've tried to do is think, what does this person legitimately have a say in, right? And then which of these candidates understands to a greater degree where the power of the office, ends and begins, and where and which one is much more keen to sort of violate or ignore the Constitution to increase the power of the federal government. And then, after I decide that, then I look at each of them, and I tend to lean already towards the one who understands the limitations of federal power. And I say, okay, well, you've got the edge because you seem to appreciate the fact that states are states and the federal government's federal government. That's a plus in your column. Now, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with these many agencies that FDR created that shouldn't be, most of them, with the power that they give you, the money that it appropriates to run their budgets? And are you going to use it for coercive control and to use them as an emperor to make a bunch of regulations that coerce people into doing things they didn't vote for, that were not laws passed by Congress and signed by you, but where you could just say, oh, regulatory agency said so? Or are you going to use those alphabet agencies to protect people's rights? Are you going to turn it inside out from what FDR intended and say, all right, they're here, but we're going to do it differently. We're going to use these to make sure that the people engaged in the, let's say, private sector with these industries or with these domains of our economy are not committing fraud. They're not paying off politicians to pass laws in their favor that are anti-competitive. If that's how you want to use your executive power with these agencies, now you get a big solid green check mark for me. Because as much as I would love to have somebody come in and pull a Malay and just go, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone, and get rid of them all. This isn't Argentina, and it's not going to work like that. We're probably stuck with them until such time as we can demonstrate to the American people that we don't need them. And the first step in that respect is to use them to free us up. And then once we're existing where we have more freedom and they're just safeguarding those freedoms and protecting us from these kinds of fraud, and Congress is passing laws that also protect us from other kinds of fraud and anti-competitive, regulations and so on, or behaviors, then we can maybe begin the conversation of, do we really need this? Do we really need this? Now that you guys know that, what fraud looks like, whatever, we've sort of deregulated things where real competition is coming back into the marketplace. To what extent do we need all these alphabet agencies? And maybe then we can begin to get rid of some of them. No, I think we can get rid of Department of Education day one. That's Deb's.
I totally agree.
Deb's personal policy. But I also know they're going to move a lot of their operation over to Health and Human Services and Labor Department, immediately. They're already ready to do it. So we have to also have someone in charge of those departments who is going to reject the request to appropriate funds to fund all of this mental health shit in the schools from the federal government and all this career and college readiness crap, and reprivatize the loan system for colleges. That's what should be done. And I'm not saying Trump is going to do these things. I'm just saying, of the two of them, the one more likely to be open to have that conversation is probably him. It's just a guess. Who's next?
Well, I just was going to say, because I have to run down for dinner. The main thing that happened was whenever Kennedy spoke yesterday, I was at work and I dropped everything to listen to him talk, because even though I disagreed with a lot of his policies, because I'm kind of I'm a crunchy conservative libertarian. Like, I love him as a person. I can respect all the work that he's done. But then I went on his page and I looked at his policies and I'm like, I kind of live like Vivek. I want to shut it down. I don't want to like clean it up and reform it. I want to get rid of it. But then I respect him so much because there's just so much of him that I think a lot of people that are conservative also understand that like he really does love this country. And apart from him talking with Trump, and what I saw yesterday was like every time I would see him talk, even just watch his podcast, he really is passionate for the American people. And he had really good ideas for cleaning things up. And he had different perspectives on things that I had never thought about. And I appreciate any candidate that can make me think and doesn't set my bullshit detector off.
Yeah.
And Kennedy never did that for me. He never set my bullshit thing off. I would think about his policies. I would go and look at what he did. I would see how effective or not effective they would be. And so I always liked him, and I kind of leaned towards him because I voted third party probably since 2008, since Ron Paul. And I've never voted mainstream. And this time around, I was like, I've talked to you about this stuff. Like, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I've never voted for Trump. I don't like him. I just can't do it. His personality is so abrasive. His policies I can get behind, but his personality is abrasive, blah, blah, blah. And then like I was paying attention to Kennedy's campaign. And then when he said he was going to make it, there was an announcement earlier in the week and he's like, he's going to talk on Friday. And there was all the chatter on Twitter about like, oh, he's going to join Trump, which was that chatter was during the RNC.
Right.
People thought maybe he was going to get picked for VP, which would have been extraordinary, honestly.
Would have been epic.
That would have been epic and much bigger than what we're talking about right now. That would have brought over so many people. But like, one of the things that's done this for me, and I watched Kennedy, I felt like the whole world stopped when I was listening to him on Friday, to be completely honest. I felt like I was watching a historic moment. Mm-hmm. And then when I found out that CNN cut out part of everything that he was talking about with the propaganda and the censorship, it just reinforced like my respect for him. And I saw, if you watched him speak, there was also like that video of him speaking with Trump at that Trump rally recently. I don't know if that was yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was.
If you watched him on the stage while Trump was talking, he looked like he was sucking on a lemon. So there's a large part of me that's like, he really had to swallow a lot to make this work. On the flip side, for Trump to get him to come to his side, to me was huge, because to me it speaks like no matter how much and how I feel about Trump, the man can get people to talk to each other and work together that I've never seen in the same room together. And that to me was convincing in terms of like me leaning towards voting for Trump, because I'm kind of like, this is the man that did the Abraham Accords. This is the guy that like basically kept things fairly peaceful for 4 years. And like, I'm not, like I said, I'm not like, I've told you, I'm not a huge Trump fan, but I was just like torn over this. And then whenever he brought Kennedy to his side, he also got, for ill or good or whatever, when you're watching the RNC, he had like the head of the Teamsters there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, whether you like that or not, the guy, no one from that union had stepped foot in an RNC convention in how long? And you're like, how is he able to get these people to share a space together, whether they even get along or work together, but just to be in the same room together? It does speak volumes to me. Like, it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, I love Trump and I'm going to like go full on MAGA. But I do stand back and I try and weigh these things. And I'm like, if he can get people to work together and he's able to unify people that are extraordinarily disparate from each other, it says something.
Yeah.
It
Well,
says
that's
something
true.
it says something about like his ability to get. And my biggest issue right now in this election, in all honesty, is like what's going on with the border and what's going on with these endless wars.
Yeah.
And Kennedy has been crystal clear this entire time how he's felt about the endless wars. I've felt that way since I switched over to Ron Paul's camp in 2008, and he opened my eyes to the endless war and the war machine. And I feel like there's so many people that are conservative and kind of middle-ish leftish that are just sick and tired of the endless wars.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like I know a lot of people that are going to vote for him because of his promise to get us out of Ukraine and his promise to broker peace deals.
Right.
And like for me, that is honestly the biggest issue right now, because we're just like they want to take us to Iran. That's the next war.
No,
there's never going to be an end to this. Our Our children are going to be overseas fighting forever if we don't find some
Right.
way to put an end to it.
Nothing makes us safer, in my opinion, than when we are just minding our own business. And I mean that
Can
literally.
I
like the founders wanted us
can
to
I
do,
ask you guys a question?
you know?
Yeah.
If either RFK or Trump don't follow the globalist agenda, what happens?
I think we saw what happened a month ago. You get your ear shot off, maybe your head.
I think you saw it with COVID too.
Saw it with COVID, saw it with Trump trying to shoot Trump in the head. I mean, look at RFK knows his dad and his uncle were both shot because they didn't go with those agendas. So I think it's pretty clear, like when I was watching this as an American, just sitting here watching this, okay, they're going after him in the courts, can't get him out with the courts. And I just have to keep coming at this and say, like, I've never voted for him. I've never been a huge fan. I've just been kind of watching. I'm a libertarian. But I'm like watching this and I'm like, okay, now they're going after him through the courts. That didn't work. Oh, now they're trying to arrest him and put him in jail. That didn't work. And my logical thought process, without listening to like a bunch of pundits or listening to a bunch of podcasts, was offhand in my mind. I'm like, well, the next thing they can do is try and kill him. And then a month ago, that actually happened. Somebody tried to shoot him. And then you're just kind of sitting here and you're like, this is crazy. And then, like, I don't know. So from my perspective, it's kind of like he doesn't, his personality being as abrasive as it is, like you talked about, Deb, with your dad dealing with him.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it works to the advantage if you can direct that into the right direction. Like if he can be directed and he's willing to listen to people, at least sometimes, or at least there's somebody around him whispering in his ear. I don't know if he's going to bring Vivek in or not at all, because Vivek is more of like a shut this crap down type of person. He's not really a let's use these fourth branch of government agencies to reform anything. He's more of a like, we need to shut it down now type of person. So I don't know if like Vivek's going to come and be called on to play a role in this, but he would be crazy if he didn't bring him into his administration somehow, because Vivek is the future of the Republican Party in my mind.
Yeah.
And it's like that direction is where I hope we're headed towards someone like that, because he's inspiring. And I like to listen to him talk, and he talks about policy, and that was my guy at the beginning of this. But like just to stick back with the topic though, like I'm still reluctant, but when Kennedy stepped up there and was like crying at the end of it all because he feels like this is his last shot, and it's obviously strategy, like you said. But I believe when Bobby says that he's got 10 years left to try and make a difference in the things that he loves. And he thought this was the only way. And his wife, pretty much hates Trump. So this is probably causing a lot of stress in their house right now.
Yeah.
But that made a difference to me because I was like, holy crap. I kept telling the kids, this is a historic moment. I'm going to make my children watch Kennedy's speech tonight because I want them to understand how historic this is, that a third party person that has made such great strides is willing to work with Trump. Whether you like him or not, I don't really care. It's a historic moment. Like, I'm going to make my kids watch the speech tonight because also, like, Kennedy was so composed, and I want them to see somebody who knows how to give a good speech too.
Yeah, that's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, like
as hard as it is to listen.
I can barely get through his speeches, honestly. Barely get through it.
Yeah, his voice is strained. But thanks for joining. And I just have only about like 5 more minutes too. So if there are other people wanted to say like anything at the end here, please do. And then we'll wrap up. So do you have any final thoughts on any of this? But I hope this has been helpful for those who've been listening rather than speaking. We're just sort of exploring the pros, the cons, the thought processes. There's no perfect answer. I think honestly, I can't remember in my lifetime, and I'd have to go all the way back to Reagan to say that I was like, yes, I'm very happy to vote for this person. But it's not a great set of choices we have. So this is what we have. All right. Ethan, did you want to say something to wrap up?
Well, I wanted to circle back. You probably 15, 20 minutes ago had mentioned something that I'd said at the beginning of the conversation that was helpful to you. How would you phrase what you interpreted?
Okay, so what I heard you saying essentially, and I sort of tried to paraphrase for, I think it was Zulu who was here. He's gone now, but was that you said if you look at the actual, sort of policy positions, or even what you assume to be the policy positions of the two people, which one is more likely to be focusing on using power coercively against me or against the people versus looking for ways to restore more autonomy or liberty back to people, even if they're not dismantling the whole system. In other words, sort of doing, not taking advantage of being in power to add more power or to add more coercive measures. And you said when you looked at Trump, you didn't really see anything. I mean, you didn't see it in even the Project 2025, which isn't even his thing, and that you didn't see it in any of his own policy positions, that he was actively looking to take on more federal power, to use the federal power at his disposal to coerce people into any particular kind of action or inaction. And whereas on the other side, we've heard they've declared that they want to do things that will take money, take more property, that they want to redistribute property, that they want to they're even entertaining the draft. I mean, it's like it's crazy.
Seriously coercive. And how do they go about guaranteeing a draft is functional?
Yeah. And they've even talked about a draft for just community service. They're not even, they're willing to coerce our children into service that is even military. That it's just outrageous. Like what country is this anymore?
Good. And another thought that I had with that, I don't know if I was very clear on it, is the concern for purity of principle.
Yes.
And I think we can chase purity of principle almost to death to where we have an audience of me. Are you the old cartoon? Are you Reformed theology? And it goes down, and to the end, it's you scream heretic, even though and scream heretic and push your friend off the bridge. Right. But you've agreed on 99% of the content.
I think what we have to get back to maybe is, always talking about principles, especially, between elections, and making sure that we keep our, making the moral case for liberty consistently and, repetitively. And then when it comes to elections, we have no choice but to vote pragmatically. We don't, it's such a ridiculous, it's such a ridiculous reach at this point to think we can vote principles, because there's really not even a candidate where I look at the candidate and say, oh yes, all my principles are represented in this candidate. They're not, forget about it. That's not going to happen.
I like how you said that.
So,
and thanks for opening the space.
Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. It has helped me a lot. So I'm very grateful just to have had the opportunity to explore these thoughts. And I thank you all for your contributions, and thanks for listening. Obviously this has been recorded, so if you missed portions of it, you want to go back and listen to, you can. It's pretty long, but I think we need to keep having these kinds of conversations. And at the end of, I hate this expression, but at the end of the day, it's a secret ballot. But it has to know how you vote. You don't owe anybody an explanation. And that's part of why I wanted to have this, is I just need to be able to sleep at night. My own conscience has to be clear, and I have to know that I'm doing things for reasons. I don't act on emotion. And so as long as I can give myself good reasons without rationalizing, then I feel pretty good about it. So I hope everybody else can take comfort in the same kind of thought process. So thank you guys. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And I'll be back on my channel for a live show on Tuesday evening. Take care. Thank you.